Welcome to Seahawks Forever, powered by BetUS. I'm Dan, and if you're watching live, thanks for joining us. First of all, the game's still going on. Sunday Night Football, the Seahawks playoff hopes as we speak at this moment still alive as the Seahawks need the Falcons to upset the Commanders tonight to give themselves a chance for that game next week in LA against the Rams to still mean something and give them a shot at winning the division. The Falcons lined up for a 57-yard field goal as time expired that would have won it. The field goal came up short, so we are going to overtime, pulling for the Falcons. Tonight, though, we're going to take a look at the whole sphere, what's going on with the Seattle Seahawks. We'll know if they're eliminated or not here in a couple of minutes. We'll react to that certainly when that becomes official. Bryce Coutts of the HawkZone Rundown is going to be joining me today as well. We're going to talk about a lot of stuff. Everything you guys want to talk about. Hop into the comments, bring your questions and takes. We know what a couple of the subjects are. We're not going to shy away from any of that tonight. We're going to talk offensive coordinator. We're going to talk quarterbacks. We're going to talk cuts and salary cap implications. We're going to talk draft. All of that. Who are these Seahawks? How close are they to being a contender? How close are they to being irrelevant? What are some of their draft needs as we sit here today, and how can they fix some of these offensive issues so they can match the progress we saw with the defense? Let's get going. This is Seahawks Forever with Dan and Bryce joining me in just a few moments after this.
Welcome to the Seahawks Forever podcast. In-depth analysis on everything Seahawks. And now, here's your host, Dan Viens.
Head on over to BetUS, sign up for your new account today, and they will give you a 150% sign-up bonus on your first deposit, 125% on your second and third deposits, up to $2,000. That's using the promo code YouTube150. All right, Bryce, welcome back into the show. We probably should have gone live about 5 minutes ago so that people could have followed along and got our reactions to that last drive as the Falcons went down and gave themselves a chance behind the arm of Michael Penix to tie that game up. This is how close this season has become, with the Seahawks on the brink of elimination, waiting for other teams, needing help from other teams. Even if the Falcons win tonight and the Lions win tomorrow to keep them alive, then we gotta do the same thing next weekend and hope a bunch of teams lose if the Seahawks can beat the Rams somehow. How are your feelings overall just about where we sit today at the end of week 17, teetering on the brink of elimination, and how would you sum up just kind of this season that we've seen in the first season under Mike Macdonald's leadership?
So for me, the first 49ers game kind of changed my expectations this year. I know you and me talked about it. Going into that game, I was pretty optimistic. We had started obviously 3-1 at that point. We had just lost to Detroit. We had them at home. The 49ers kind of were beat up. They weren't the team, they had been the past couple seasons. And we lost that game. And it wasn't a very pretty loss, as some people would say. It was pretty gut-wrenching to lose that game. And it changed my expectations for this team and really helped me focus on what this team was this year, which was a transitional team. We're in the first year of a head coach, whole bunch of new coaches. How's that going to go the rest of the way? It's going to be rocky. There's going to be ups, there's going to be downs, as we've seen throughout. But there's two games that stand out to me when I look at this team, and the fact that we're having to sit here and watch and hope for a team that we beat pretty handily early on in the year try and help us get into the playoffs. And it's that Giants loss to Daniel Jones, who's not even a starting quarterback in the NFL anymore.
Not even on the Giants anymore, yeah.
And the Rams game, the first Rams game where we had the red zone catastrophes down there, felt very much like the Cincinnati game to me of 2 years ago with Pete Carroll, where we just couldn't get anything going right in the red zone. And that's where, for me, I looked at it and I went, that's why we're here more than anything. Like, I look at the Green Bay games, the Minnesota games, those are good teams. I don't look after watching the Rams last night. I look at that and I go, I think we're a better team in a lot of ways than the Rams are. Like, they barely could skate by the Cardinals, who we handled pretty well the second time around. And it's frustrating to sit here a little bit and go, man, like, we're banking on other teams like to get in. But at the same time, it's Mike Macdonald's first year. I think things are going to get corrected. Our defense did exactly what we hoped, it would eventually do, which has became pretty much the last half of this year a top 10 unit. And That's something that we can take to the bank and grow on. And, hopefully next year the offense decides to join it in a capacity of some sort.
Yeah, I'm with you. Those two games were obviously the deciding factor. And both of those are games that I think they really had no business losing. That Giants game, if you play that game 100 times, I think the Seahawks win it 90. I mean, it's the NFL. It's hard to win more than that, if you were to take that hypothetical. But it was just the defense was such a mess then, still couldn't stop a nosebleed. The Giants ran all over us with Tyrone Tracy. Devin Singletary was out. Malik Neighbors was even out in that game. We didn't have to face him. It just seemed like one that was for the taking. But that defense was just such a mess at the time. And the offense was kind of, doing what they could to try and make up for it. And they did. They were able to come through against New England by being prolific and moving up and down the field to account for, the defense giving up a ton of rushing yards. And then that Rams game, it's on Geno. That's one of the games that if you're putting a reel together to back up your argument that the Seahawks need to move on from Geno Smith, that's the biggest one. The red zone pick that was run back for, a pick 6 from the end zone was obviously a huge play in that game. But you mentioned the red zone issue. Wasn't that the one where we had 8 shots inside the 3-yard line? Was that the Rams game?
No, that's the Jets game. We had that many shots inside that was a Jets game, which again, you have another game where that's the, kind of, even though we won that.
Yeah.
It's funny, Dan, because I look at this, the offense and defensive side of the ball, and the offense, the way it's been and the way games go with this offense as of late, the first, 7-8 plays in our first drive, like you look at Chicago, we went right down the field and then we stall out. Yeah. Kind of reminds me of how this team and this offense unit started the year. Like our offense was great in the first 4 weeks of the year. Like you think of that Detroit game, we went shot for shot in a lot of ways with them and played really well. And then we falter and we have moments where it's like, man, like we could just keep it together a little bit longer.
Because it was in the Rams game, wasn't it, that we had a 3rd and 1 and went 4th on 4th? We had back to back.
And we couldn't get the inches. Yeah. And that's where, for me, like I just look at our offense as a whole this year, and it's been such an inconsistency. And I just look at it as, the whole season on offense has kind of been like our games now in offense, where we start out fast and everything's great. And then by the end of the game, we're going, how did the offense fall apart? Like, how did we rush for 48 yards on the first drive and only finish with 122 at the end of it? And everyone goes, 122 yards. And I'm going, we only ran for like 20 in the second half alone. Like you gained a maturity of it in the first half of the game. Like, where's our run game all of a sudden disappeared, especially in that game against Chicago, 6-3. Like, how did we not run the ball more? And Kenny McIntosh, like, he's one guy I want to see more of going forward.
Yeah, love his running style. I talked about the other day that he and Charbonnet both are just better equipped to see daylight and run towards daylight. That's their first instinct, whereas Ken Walker Jr.'s first instinct is to always be greedy and want more. And a lot of times to get that, he tries to bounce plays outside of its designed hole. Now, Charbonnet and McIntosh go about it in very different ways. Charbonnet is a much more patient runner. There's times where he takes the handoff, and I kind of described it as like almost Le'Veon Bell-ish, where I have a lot of anxiety when I watch Zach Charbonnet run, because at first it just seems like he's stuck in quicksand, and then he decides where he's going to go, and he gets up to speed pretty quickly, and he's a physical running back, and he can hit the hole. McIntosh is the exact opposite of that. Like from the moment he takes the handoff running full speed, and he's just going to figure it out on the way. And it really paid off. I mean, he averaged 6.8 yards per carry the other day. I'd love to see him get some more touches in this last game, especially. Now, let me ask you this. And as we speak, the Commanders are on the 19-yard line now.
Yeah.
Chip shot field goal at this point, although with the overtime rules, the Falcons would get a chance to answer, at least if it's only a field goal. Right? This is still the first drive.
Yeah, still the first drive.
First possession by the Commanders. But what was I saying right before that? I just got off track.
It had to do with, I think, the offense and
yeah. If the Seahawks are eliminated here in the next couple of minutes, do you approach next week differently, or are there some guys? I know a lot of people are going to want to talk about the quarterback. I don't think there's any chance in hell the Seahawks would go with Sam Howell next week just to see what they have in him for a game. However, with some of the escalators built into Geno Smith's contract, there may be some prudent reasons not to play him, but the Seahawks have never been that type of organization. They're not going to start now. But are there some other opportunities for some of these young guys to play that you think that you'd like to see them take advantage of?
I would like to see Nehemiah Pritchett play at corner. Yeah. He's one guy I'd like to see get a look. On the offensive side, I'd like to see Christian Haynes get some more rep at left guard potentially, and because I don't think Laken Tomlinson's going to be coming back. See what that looks like. Is our okay? Good. Stop. Sorry, I'm just distracted watching.
Score touchdown. It's over, right? They've changed the overtime rule so many times, but
yeah. So the way it works, if they score touchdown, in regular season play, it's over. If it's in playoffs, the other team still gets to answer. But if they kick a field goal in regular season overtime, then Atlanta will get a chance to go down the field and match, or get a touchdown. The other guy I want to see even get more reps, and he's started to get more, is AJ Barner. I would like to see AJ Barner get more run, even though I know he's getting quite a bit right now, but just mainly take over that role from Noah Fant, because I don't see Noah Fant being back on this roster. And yeah, McIntosh, I think, is the other one. Just get more catches and such involved. Oh, come on. Don't let him score. Get him down. Oh, good shot right in the
little Jaden Daniels scramble there, gets stopped at 1.
Oh, they're down to the 2?
Third and goal at about the 1.5.
Yeah. Oh, God. That's what it's going to come down to, and unless they go for it on 4th down here, but,
Yeah.
Oh, he almost got in there too. Jeez, AJ Terrell, good.
He took a shot in the back. This is
he took a big. See, this is where I worry for Jaden Daniels. Just on a topic, he reminds me so much of the build of RG3, and he takes so much punishment. Like, he's not 200 and Josh Allen 30, 40 pounds and can take a little bit more of a shot like that.
Yeah. Timeout.
Okay, why did they take a timeout here?
Just make sure they got the right play.
Maybe.
Are the Falcons eliminated if they lose?
I believe they are, yes.
Interesting.
I want to double check.
How do you feel?
Go ahead, Dan.
What'd you see out of Michael Penix tonight?
Well, me being the Husky fan, he's still got some areas of growth you can see that he needs to, get used to in the NFL, but he commands the pocket so well for a young player, and moving around and creating space for himself to throw. And he knows what he's good at and what he's not. He's not running around like Jaden Daniels. He's looking to get rid of the ball. I think Atlanta struck, honestly, some gold there with a quarterback, and they've got their guy for the future. They just need to build around him, create a solid offensive line, and build up that defense. I think Atlanta's going to be a team to mess with. And he dropped it.
Oh, you're ahead of me a little bit. Okay.
Oh no, never mind.
Zach Ertz touchdown. Commanders win. They got to confirm it. Let's see.
I thought he dropped it.
It's a heck of a throw. Very reminiscent of the Penix throw on 4th and 10 earlier to keep him alive. That really, really impressive shot there. Let's see on the replay. Does he come down?
That angle doesn't show it well enough, but it looked like he dropped. But I think he caught it.
That's Zach Ertz. And with
that's it.
Are they just waiting for it to be confirmed? Everyone just kind of standing on there.
Everyone's on the field now. That's game.
So, in a twist of irony, and I'm sure some fans are going to have a lot of fun with this, Dan Quinn, in his first season as head coach of the Commanders, they are now 11-5, and their first playoff bid since they just showed it, and then they just took it off the screen. So a successful rookie season for Jaden Daniels, a successful first season for Dan Quinn as head coach of the Commanders, and in his first season as head coach of the Seahawks, Mike Macdonald will not get the opportunity to coach in the playoffs. The Seahawks have officially now been eliminated, and the LA Rams are your NFC West champions, which at the beginning of the year, that was my pick.
As mine.
I thought the Rams had the better roster, even compared to the 49ers overall. I thought, we were banking on that young defense coming around, a lot of youth there. They've really gone heavily on that side of the ball in the draft the last couple of years. Obviously, losing Aaron Donald to retirement this last offseason but keeping most of that offense intact. They brought in some free agents on the offensive line. They had some injury issues. They got off to a terrible start, and then they rallied and really, although they haven't looked great in the last month, they've done just enough behind their veteran quarterback to win games and do what they had to do and get it done when they had to get it done. And so the Rams end up winning the division regardless now of what happens next week.
Well, I guess that allows us to start looking ahead in a way, Dan.
Absolutely. The one thing, let's see, I don't know if I can figure it out tonight. I've had fans come at me in the last, there's been a lot of debate over the last couple of weeks about which direction the Seahawks should take, right? You've gotten it. We've had those talks. Obviously, it's going to be a focal point of this show for the next 6 months, 7 months. And a lot of fans have come at me with, hey, if we don't have a legitimate shot to go deep in the playoffs and potentially contend for Super Bowl, then I'd rather we lose because we'll get a higher draft pick. First of all, even if they had lost this last week to the Bears and lose Sunday to the Rams, I think the highest they could draft is 12th or 13th. They're probably going to end up around 15. Those 3 picks aren't going to transform your franchise. They're just not. Also, I just think that's a loser mentality. I don't ever want my team to want to lose games or do things to try and actively lose games. Also, and we're going to talk a lot about this over the next few months, of course, this just isn't the draft for that either.
No.
Like, there's not a guy at 12 that's going to make you a better football team than the guy at 15. Now, you could nitpick that and maybe there's a better scheme fit, whatever. It's not worth losing over. And it's not a good draft. I mean, we've heard that. We continue to hear it. You're going to find guys. There's guys we're going to get excited about, and you're looking for scheme fits, obviously. And that staff, John Schneider and his front office personnel have been working hard at this for months already. But it's not the kind of draft. In fact, we keep hearing that whereas most teams in a typical season usually end up with between 15 and 20 first-round grades on their board, this year teams may have half that many. When I had Rob Staten on the show, I know you've talked to Rob recently as well. He came out with his first horizontal board. He only had 9 first-round grades on his, which he said was remarkably low. So you're already outside of that range. I guess as we sit here today, if you could rub the bottle, get the genie, and you get one wish, you could make one move today to try and help this Seahawks team make a step forward next year. A realistic move, not I want Joe Burrow, right? What would it be?
And is it player acquisition only, or is coach?
Anything.
Give me a all-pro level left guard on this team. So whether that'd be like, you could get Trey Smith potentially. I don't know if he's all pro at this point, but someone of that caliber. Give us like if we could get Joe Thuney, but I don't think we could. It's out of the wheelhouse realistically. You talk about Joe Burrow for quarterback. Joe Thuney would be really hard to pull out of Kansas City, but get above average players on this O-line. Stop kicking the can. Like we talk about kicking the can with the quarterback. We've kicked the can on our O-line since practically 2015 when we traded Max Unger away. Like we've just been recycle players, Locke or Jokel and Sowell and, all Jamarco Jones and all these other guys that we've had come in, Webb, like go get a serious player to play on the left side. And especially if you want to evaluate Charles Cross. Like we talk about Charles Cross and people have talked about, hey, we need to give him an extension. Well, I think part of Cross's poor play down the stretch, which a lot of people may think is blasphemy for me to say that, but he has struggled. It has to do with, I think he doesn't have a solid running mate that he truly trusts beside him in Lincoln Tomlinson. So that would be my wish. Like get solid guards, I think would be my one wish for Seattle. Like we're not talking like roll out the guys we talked about, get guys.
Yeah, it's a tough year to do that. There's not a lot on the free agent market.
Nope.
Trey Smith, you mentioned, will be available. The Chiefs probably can't afford to franchise tag him with where their salary cap stands. I'm looking at a couple of others that are set for unrestricted free agency that are under 30, guys that you'd want to hang your hat on a little bit that you could grow with. Ben Bredeson is going to be an unrestricted free agent from the Buccaneers. Kevin Zeitler will be available again if you think at the age of 33 that he's got another good year left in him. And then it's guys like John Feliciano, who 49er fans don't even like, and Dalton Reisner and Cody Ford. It's all the same. It's the same names, really. So
I think you have to do it, Dan, through trade.
Not a lot of impact there.
Yeah, no, you're gonna have to trade for somebody. And that may be giving up future draft picks to go get somebody. Like,
that's the thing. Giving up good offensive linemen these days in the NFL. I don't.
It depends. You got to look at it in some respects of teams. Like, the best way to do it, and this is the way I found to do it, I've talked to a few people, is look at teams that have taken linemen high in the first 2 rounds the last couple of years in spots where they already have a guy potentially and a guy they may move on from. And that's where, you're talking about Trey Smith, but we talk about how well John Schneider makes these in-season trades, like Ernest Jones, Leonard Williams, and so on. Maybe part of Seattle's problem is they don't have someone that can identify O-line talent the proper way, whether it's in the league itself right now or in the draft, because we haven't done a good job of developing guys in-house realistically, and then they go off to other places. Like Posic's a starting center for Cleveland and is not half bad there. We couldn't figure out how to use Posic here.
Yeah.
Mark Lewinsky leaves and goes and starts somewhere else. And so it's frustrating when Justin Barrett's the only guy you've really given a second contract to, and it took you 3 different spots on the line until he finally found his home. He was only there for a short period. He wasn't a great center to begin with when he was there. Like, he was okay, but he wasn't great. So that's where, for me, like, I think if you're going to go and improve this line, it might not be through free agency. It's going to have to be through trade in the draft. And you might need to reevaluate this offseason who is in making those decisions when it comes to the O-line.
How about this idea? Because this is where I've settled on the offensive line after watching them the last 6 weeks. I mean, really ever since Abe Lucas came back and Sataoa Lamea beat out Christian Haynes for the right guard spot when Anthony Bradford was placed on IR. And even Connor Williams retiring and gave us a chance really for the first time to see Oluwatimi on a week in, week out basis. Like, that line gets better every week. And it's getting better with guys that you've invested draft capital in, with the idea that they would develop into starting offensive linemen. And I would make the argument now, especially after seeing Lucas now 6-7 games in, where his recovery times, he's bouncing back. He's they're managing his practice reps throughout the week, but he doesn't look like he's favoring the leg. He's still wearing the brace, but he's not limping. I think he gets stronger every week. He's moving well. They're using him. They're pulling him. I think we can count on, I think we've seen enough. We can count on Abe Lucas next year coming back at right tackle, especially given the fact that now he's going to have a healthy entire offseason to attack and get even stronger and more comfortable. I think Sataoa Lamea looks like a long-term starting guard. I think Oluwatimi looks solid enough that if you can't find someone to beat him out, you're okay there. Although we both like Jalen Sundell, and I'm not so sure that given a full offseason, he can't beat Olu out, or that they would draft a guy there. And your idea about left guard, obviously, that's the weak link right now. You can't bring Laken Tomlinson back again. He just hasn't been good enough. I know they like his leadership ability, and they wanted a veteran on that line. I think if you can nail a starting guard in the draft, or at least someone capable of starting, and if Christian Haynes beats him out, or Anthony Bradford comes back and beats him out at left guard, remember he played quite a bit of left tackle at LSU, so he's played on that side of the center. Then, I think I can make an argument that we have 4 out of 5 pieces potentially in place. And the continuity now that we're finally getting a chance to see is showing up, and this line's getting better week in, week out. This idea that fans continue to throw at me that we need to draft all offensive linemen, that we need to flush all of them out and replace them all and rebuild the entire line is ridiculous.
No, it is. And you've got 2 bookends. Like, if Lucas can now have this offseason to actually prepare for a season instead of rehabbing, it's going to be better for him in the long run. And I think, like you said, he has bounced back well throughout the games. We've seen him on the injury report, but that was to be expected. He never missed a start after he came back. He was in, he was going. And, I think Charles Cross really has to excel this next year. I don't see a rush to put a contract extension in front of him. I'd give him his 5th-year option. Yeah. And if halfway through next season with a better guard beside him, you see him the way he started the season this year, then I think you have a conversation. But it was funny. I was on with the Seahawkers podcast last night during their live watch of the Cardinals game, and I said that Charles Cross reminds me a lot of Russell Okung in the way that Russell Okung, we drafted high when he came in with Earl, but he was always a top 15 left tackle. Sometimes he'd have, weeks and stuff where he was top 10, even top 5, but he's always kind of in that area. That's why I look at Charles Cross. I don't look at Charles Cross as a dominant left tackle. He has moments where he's really good and matches up well with and then he has other moments where he turns into a bit of a turnstile and has struggle points. Yeah. I look at him in the same view that I had Russell Okung, and that's where, like, you think about, and I know it's kind of hard to compare. We're talking about a Hall of Famer here, but you think about when Walter Jones even came into the NFL with the Seahawks. He had hiccups, but you saw dominance from him. Like, he dominated, whether it was the run game, the pass blocking, he just dominated. I don't think I've ever seen a game where I look and I went, damn, like Charles Cross is just destroying, like, whether it's in the run, whether it's in the pass, like he's just owning his opponent. Like, he has reps here and there, but it's never like I come out of a game and I go, damn, like if we didn't have Charles Cross tonight, like we wouldn't have been able to do anything. Like when we had Walter Jones and that crew, and again, Hall of Famer, I get it. So I understand that some people may not like the comparison. There were points where you go, holy crap, if we didn't have Walter Jones shutting down Dwight Freeney, like Dwight Freeney did nothing all night. That's what you want if you're going to pay a left tackle, big, high top money. You want a guy that you can trust to be like, hey, he's going to be the guy that no matter what or who's on the other side, Bosa, Hutchinson, Cross has got him, and we're okay. We can worry about the rest of this.
Yeah, we were all encouraged in training camp, especially I remember when Albert Breer visited their training camp and said that he looked like an all-pro. There's a lot of buzz about how good he looked in training camp. I don't think the Seahawks do him a lot of favors either. They leave him on an island as much as anyone in the league, and I don't know if he's that kind of player. He's still susceptible to power. He gets beat on bull rushes and pushed back into the quarterback quite a bit. But again, to your earlier point that sometimes Laken Tomlinson was so bad in pass protection that Cross was having to try and pick up his guy too. Yeah, it all has to work so well together up there. It's really difficult to grade these guys sometimes, obviously, because we see some really strange stuff coming out of PFF oftentimes after some of these games. Satawa Lamea with a 1.9 pass blocking grade a couple weeks ago. That seemed a little ridiculous. I don't know. How is that even possible? Another guy that I missed on the as a potential free agent target, if the Seahawks really want to invest there in free agency and spend some money, he didn't come up on my first list because I was looking strictly at left guards. But James Daniels, former second-round pick, Pittsburgh Steelers, just 27 years of age. He's set to enter free agency. He'll get paid well. Another guy that, the Steelers might have to let him get to the market because, using the franchise tag might be prohibitive. They might need to use that on Russell if he doesn't agree to a deal right away. And also they've drafted a ton of guys up front in the last couple of years and they might feel like they can save some of that money and put it elsewhere. So he's another guy that I think would be really enticing. But other than that, there's not a lot of guys, kind of slim pickings on the free agent market.
The one guy that I would be interested in a trade, and I think you could potentially get him out of the situation because I do believe he's got 2 years left in his contract, maybe one, is Wyatt Teller. Out of Cleveland.
Hey, the Browns.
And I know there's bad blood because of what happened obviously in the preseason this year.
Oh, yeah.
But he is a good if you put him in that offensive line, I think you see a change potentially. And he's a guy I would take a look at.
You'd have to send a hell of a lot more than a thank you card to or an apology card to Uchenna Nwosu. Yeah. Let's talk about this. Where are you? I think I know your answer to this. I think you've been set on it pretty solidly for the last couple of weeks. A week from tomorrow, Black Monday, right? Because I don't think the Seahawks will take very long in their evaluation of key personnel. They're going to want to get going on this offseason as quickly as possible, especially if they're going to be searching for another coordinator. Is Ryan Grubb back for 2025, or do you think he's in jeopardy?
I think Ryan Grubb's in. I think one of two things with Ryan Grubb. I don't see a way back for him. I really don't. And I think he's an extremely smart coach. I think he knows, how he wants to run his offense. But there's a couple reports that have come out recently, and ways things have been said in the media too, where it really makes it seem like the Seahawks have already made their decision in a way, and they're just playing out the season. You had Brady Henderson come out with his report stating that, Mike McDonald had to have Ryan Grubb convince him that he could be balanced.
Yeah.
And run a balanced attack. And Brady Henderson's a very accurate reporter with his statements. Brady's dialed in, very well respected. So that was one. And that's a pretty interesting thing that we all didn't really know that was part of the, and that may have been all those photos and everything that we saw at that diner across from, or bar across from Seahawks headquarters, was literally Grubb there trying to sell himself and how he could be balanced to Mike McDonald. They were out having a beer about it. Yeah. The other one was Albert Breers before Thursday night's game, when he made the comment that, the Seahawks franchise and the coaches really loved Geno Smith. And it was more about Geno at the time, but when there's a snippet in there, and I think I pointed out to you, where Albert goes and he says, the Seahawks coaches realize where they have failed Geno this year when it comes to the running game and play action. Yeah. And then you go back and you watch Mike McDonald's press conferences where he talks about the run game and play action, and we need to use it more, and we need to be more efficient with it. And then to hear that come out, and Albert Breer, I know, is pretty tight with John Schneider and his group of people. That to me is a pretty indicative sign of John Schneider using the media the way he's used Schefter before and stuff to kind of send a message out. Like, we realize there's an issue here. We didn't do well here. And still, I just see
very similar language to what Pete used.
Yep.
Before he fired his last two coordinators.
Exactly. And then the last one was Mike McDonald. I think it was on a 710 show. It might have been on both 710 and his KG and his Cairo show, where he was talking about how they were getting ready for this week. And he mentioned a bunch of coaches' names, and especially on the offensive staff. And Ryan Grubb wasn't one of them. Guys that brought new ideas and were really innovative. One name he did go out of his way to say was Jake Peets, who's your passing game coordinator. Yeah. Now, usually you're kind of looking for your coordinators, and considering Andre Durde really is like, he's a coordinator, but he's not a coordinator. He's not calling the plays. Right. To hear that, because I believe his name was mentioned on Cairo, but Grubb's name wasn't mentioned at all. That's a pretty strong tell to me that there's either just a complete disconnect. And I think there's a chance that, Ryan Grubb may just walk away himself. It may not even be a Ryan Grubb gets fired. It may be Ryan Grubb has decided to, step away like Schottenheimer for philosophical differences or whatever it may be. And I think there's a chance Ryan Grubb ends up back down in Alabama with Kalen DeBoer. The question will be what happens with Scott Huff. Does he go? Because they were kind of a tandem deal. Yeah. Does Scott Huff leave? And that's where it's going to be interesting, because I've got a list here, because I know you and me kind of prep for the show on possible candidates to replace Grubb. There's so many issues with this offense, and we saw them all kind of come to light again in the Chicago game, that I don't see a way back. And I was high on Grubb when they hired him. I'm a Husky fan. I really was high on it. But as the season went on and you could see the imbalance start to come in, and balance doesn't mean 50-50. So when people think about, when we talk about balance, right? Balance is having a counterpunch to what the defense is doing and be able to lean on things at certain points and not have things completely go away or become inept. Our run game has become inept. And like Robert Mays put out a thing, the Seahawks are 29th in RB carries. Like, for a team that wants to be what Mike McDonald said he wanted to be, they want to be tough and physical. And you can't have a running back room that carries the ball be 29th in the rankings for that. That's just ridiculous.
Well, and Schneider can't be happy with that, because he's invested 2 second-round picks on running backs in the last 3 years.
Correct.
Like, you're not getting bang for your buck. What did it for me with Grubb. And I'll say this, I think he's a really smart guy. I like listening to him talk about football. I think he's really passionate. I think he's motivated. I think he's going to succeed. If he goes back to college, some guys are just wired a certain way. And I think he's wired closer to Mike Leach than he is Pete Carroll or Mike Tomlin, where he just has more fun, or maybe his brain just works better. He just schematically enjoys or is better at spreading the ball around, throwing the ball down the field. And maybe it's a blind spot he has, or maybe it's just an instinctive thing that, like, when push comes to shove, I'm going to go to what I know. And for me, the moment I was out was Thursday night. Seahawks put together their best first drive of the year. They've gone 20 straight games now without scoring a touchdown on their first drive. And they do it running the football with Kenny McIntosh and Zach Charbonnet. 48 yards rushing right down the field, right up the gut. They mix in a couple of short throws. They got Noah Fant involved. Here we go. We're going to score a touchdown. We're going to take control of this game early, play from ahead, turn it loose on the Bears, and here we go. And then they're 3rd and 3 from the 9 with a chance to get a first down, go first and goal, and they go empty. I mean, I'm okay going gun there and showing pass, but not even a threat. No running back, no pistol, nobody in the backfield at all next to Geno Smith. No threat of the run at all. And your quarterback's not going to run it because he's on a bad knee. To me, you just handed all the momentum that drive had accumulated right back over to the Bears, and you just said, we're going to make it easy on you. I just can't have that.
So here's a couple of stats that really stand out to me. And the big one for me, outside of the one in the Chicago game where it was that bad, was the other third down where Geno gets strip sack, and everyone wants to blame Geno. And I'm sorry, if you watch the All 22, I don't know if you've had a chance yet, Dan.
Not all of it.
There's two guys that are running.
I've watched the sum 22.
Yeah. So they're basically, he has a check to the flat. So the running back doesn't even stay in. He leaves. Abe Lucas gets completely run around and just gives up on the play.
Yeah,
Van's running a hook, and everybody else is running 12 to 15-yard routes down the field, and there's nobody open.
No.
And Geno basically is trying to make out of nothing. People saying, well, run. He's not running out of that pocket. There's a guy right in front of him on the left side where everyone's like, escape to your left. No. He's not getting the first down. It's 3rd and 3. We have no quick game concept. So one thing Robert Mays puts in here is they're 29th in RB carries. They're 31st in play action rate. They're 32nd in quick pressure allowed. And they're 1st in shotgun rate. The entire offense is Geno operating on gun dropbacks with a bottom 3-0 line. You wouldn't want to see what this offense would look like even with average QB play.
No.
And we saw what it was like without average QB play in Sam Howell. Like, those numbers do not scream balance at all. And that's the one thing that's so hard for me about this, because I do like what Ryan Grubb does with some of his concepts, but he doesn't have a feel for the NFL game and how it works. And part of his luxury at Washington, to be honest, he had Michael Penix, who we saw tonight. He had Rome Odunze. He had guys that were better than other guys. And the wider hashes make a difference when you're calling plays, because you can stretch a defense out more horizontally. One of the throws that is a staple in Ryan Grubb's offense is the hole shot throw to beat cover 2 with your wide receiver on the outside, your X or your Z. And there's a throw they make 2 years ago versus Oregon where Penix is on the right hash and throws it on a rope and beats the safety of the receiver, and Taj Davis takes off for a touchdown. They win the game off of that throw.
Yeah.
You're not doing that in the NFL because it's not that wide. So
and
that's where I just look at and I go, I just don't see a way back for Ryan Grubb. I don't think he can sell himself back, because he'd be basically selling his soul to lie about what he wants to do philosophically.
Right. Yeah. It'd be, I promise I'll do better.
Yeah.
When you have a 17 game sample size to see how he operates. And yeah, I remember that well at UW. I remember the Apple Cup that Penix played in Pullman, where they just shredded us with those 3 receivers and just picked on our secondary that year. And they did it using the wide hashes. Dan Orlovsky did a great breakdown a couple of weeks ago about how he likes to use those 3-by-1 formations, where he has a 3-man bunch on one side and then DK split out all alone on the other side to draw attention. He's still the first read. That's still the place that Geno wants to go with the ball first if he can. but teams are bracketing him. And so it takes those guys away and leaves opportunities for the bunch. Well, when he does that, he likes to do that with the bunch to the short side. Well, in college, that would then give, because Odunze was his ex at UW. So he would have Odunze be the one like DK is now, split out, but he'd have the whole wide half of the field because of the wider hashes if they were on the other hash. So it just takes a lot of that away. He's had to relearn even his passing concepts to some extent, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and try and adapt them. It's tough. I don't. I want to get more into this, but I want to ask you one question first of all, and then we'll take a break, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit more about the offense. We are going to talk about, for those of you watching, thank you so many of you, 538 at the moment. We have almost 400 comments and questions. We're going to get to them, I promise. We'll be around for a little while. At least, look, at the beginning of the year, I specifically did not lay out, like I almost always do at the beginning of the season when the schedule comes out, what do I think the Seahawks record is going to be? I go game by game. Everyone does. It's kind of a routine exercise. We all have fun doing it. Fans like watching it. They always get good views on YouTube. I didn't this year because how could we know, right?
Right.
We got to know Pete Carroll's tendencies. We knew that roster really well. We knew there wasn't going to be a lot of turnover from year in, year out. So we could kind of make some educated guesses on how that would go. Didn't do that this year. A couple weeks into it, or right before the start of the season, I was drinking the Kool-Aid. I was optimistic. I liked a lot of the things we'd seen. And I was making some assumptions and projections, obviously, based on, the roster of the year before and what I thought Mike McDonald would do with them. I thought the defense would be better to start the season. So I said my only prediction at the beginning of the year was I thought it felt like an 11-win team. Then after the Detroit game, even though it was a loss, I felt so good about that offense at the time, what they were able to do and how they were able to operate, even with the injuries on the offensive line and the struggles they were having up there. And that was the game, if you remember, where our entire defensive line was out.
Yeah.
And I thought, hey, we gave them everything we had, competed down to the end with that team. And I came out that week and said, I think we're going to win 11 games. Then I felt good looking forward on the schedule. Obviously that didn't work out. But as you mentioned earlier, should have beat the Giants, had a hell of a shot to beat the Rams. So they aren't that far away. But at the beginning of the season, before we even started talking about records and expectations and wins and losses, I said, and Greg Bell said the same thing on my show, and I think he probably said the same thing on your show, that really all that mattered is how we felt at the end of the year, right? And I said on the show in the preseason, if at the end of the year, we feel like going into the offseason, we're close to taking that next step, and we've got a foundation now, and we know what the culture looks like, and we've got some things to hang our hat on, kind of like 2012 when they lost to the Falcons in the playoffs. You knew there were some building blocks there, that I didn't care what the win-loss record was. That's a lot easier to say when you're 0-0, right? And then it gets emotional as we get into the season. But so here we sit. It's the end of the year. They failed to make the playoffs, but we found a defense. And if we're going to talk quarterback, we're going to talk more about offensive coordinator. We're going to give you some names and guys that we think might be candidates. But they found a defense that looks sustainable, and a defense that looks like they could bring back almost entirely intact next year. If that's all they accomplished this year, is that enough?
I think the defense has arrived in a lot of ways. I think there's still room for some growth in it, but I think they're going to start a lot faster than they did, obviously, this year, learning Mike McDonald's scheme. I think we're closer than we think, but it's weird. We're also farther away than I think we thought, because we went into this year, if you remember, hey, the defense needs to be middle of the pack and we'll be okay because this offense is like got all these weapons and we're ready to go. It's like it Freaky Friday'd itself on this team, because now our defense, we're sitting here going, okay, the defense is here and we're ready to go. Now we got to get the offense to be a comparable piece to it.
Yeah.
I look at this team and go, if they can get a better and more efficient and effective O-line, and you can dial in your play caller and you do those kind of things, like there's a chance this team's a playoff team. I don't think they're a Super Bowl contending team. I think they're 3-4 maybe years away from that. But you've got a young enough roster that's ascending in key areas that you can project this team to be a playoff team. I don't look at anyone in the NFC West right now and go, damn, they're light years ahead better than we are. The Rams have their flaws. The Rams are aging. The Cardinals, who we thought might be a team that gives us a test because they're young and they're potentially up and coming. The Cardinals are who we thought they were, and they are a 500 football team at best. And the 49ers, I think, are going to have a lot of questions they're going to have to answer with their salary cap and their, what they're going to do with Brock Purdy and who they're going to keep and who they're going to cut. The division's there for the taking. It's kind of in this muddle point. It's not the powerhouse NFC West that we've known for years.
Yeah.
And that's where I look at Seattle, where if you get a few of these pieces, you fix some things that have been glaring issues, this team could very well be back in being a playoff team. And then we can start looking again, okay, what's going to get us over the top in 2026 to being a Super Bowl team? This is that 2011. Like, for me, this has always been 2011. I want to see, like, people have mentioned 2012. This to me reminds me so much of 2011 because our offense in 2011 started to come alive a little bit, but never really got rolling with Tavares and Beast Mode. Beast Mode was the only factor that year. Doug Baldwin did some things as a rookie, but we needed other pieces to kind of get us going in the right direction.
Yeah.
The defense, however, came alive in the second half of that year. This year, our defense came alive in the second half of this year. And I think that's what you can bank on, is that Mike McDonald's defense will be much better to start next year, which will help in those early games.
Oh, yeah.
It's just, how do you get this offense and what does that look like going forward?
Yeah, I think you make some good points. It reminds me of a couple of years ago when we thought, us Mariner fans thought, hey, the AFC West or the American League West is ripe for the taking. The Astros are going to take a step back. They're losing some players. They can't afford to keep them all. The Rangers had a bunch of injury issues. Here we come. Now we need to, make some moves to put us over the top. And obviously that didn't happen. It feels like that's where they are. I think as long as Kyle Shanahan's in San Francisco, they're going to be competitive. I think their window of being dominant is over, and they're going to struggle to maintain that. As you said, the Rams have some really cool things going on defense.
They do.
Young draft picks they have
the
on
other
that
side of the ball. That's a little bit where they're having some issues. And
that might actually kind of become their identity, ironically, in the next year or two. Because, Matt Stafford, another year older, at what point do they want to find a guy to move on to? A lot of speculation about whether Cooper Kupp would be a cap casualty or be potentially shopped this offseason as he, gets older and has some injury issues every year. And then the Cardinals are, you stated it perfectly, they are who we thought they were. They're still another year or two and a couple of good drafts away, or off seasons away, because they have a shit ton of cap space available. From putting together a really good roster top to bottom. But at the end of the day, they don't have an elite quarterback. And I've said from the day that he signed his extension that it was a good thing for the rest of the NFC West that they did that, because Kyler Murray is not special. I think he showed it again yesterday when he had a chance to make a play at the end of the game and win it for him and didn't do it. And I think there's too many examples of that. I just don't think he's that guy. And so there is an opportunity for Seattle. And then you look at next year, and they didn't really get a lot of breaks this year when it came to the schedule. Having to play the NFC North on their rotational schedule, best division in football, right? Lots of talk about the home schedule and going 3-6, where they were 5-1 on the road. Well, the better opponents came to Lumen Field this year, much, much tougher, playing some of the elite teams in football. Next year, it's the AFC South. So here's your home opponents as we sit today, and we won't have these locked in. 3 spots still waiting on next week. Obviously, you have your division games, so Cardinals, Rams, 49ers at home, Texans, Colts, Saints, Buccaneers, and then assuming we finish, well, I think we will. We're locked into second place in the NFC West. So then we would play the second place team from the NFC North, which would be Pittsburgh Steelers right now. That'd be interesting. Right?
Would be.
Russ coming back home. And then away, we get the 9 games on the road next year, Cardinals, Rams, 49ers, and then at Falcons, at Panthers, at Jags, at Titans, and then second place NFC East, which would be who? Miami right now?
NFC East would be...
No, NFC East. NFC East would be...
Second place, I think, is the Commanders currently.
Commanders, yeah. Dan
Dan Quinn.
Dan Quinn. And then the last one would be second place AFC North. That's your Pittsburgh game. If things stay the way that they are now. Or I'm sorry. Yeah, AFC North would be Pittsburgh. NFC North. What did I say earlier?
Would
NFC North would be the Lions again.
Yeah.
But we'd get him here for crying out loud.
Yeah, would be nice for once to not have to go to Detroit.
Finally get the Lions here, although that's still up in the air. They play the Vikings in Week 18. What a game that's going to be. So a much better chance for bouncing back, and I'll make one more point. Because I've already heard it. Like, did the Seahawks make a mistake hiring Mike McDonald instead of Dan Quinn? Right?
Mm-hmm.
There are numerous examples of coaches failing in their first attempt and then getting a second shot down the road after they went back to being a position coach or a coordinator for a while and having success, because you learn what you did right, what you did wrong, who you are, how to run your staff, all of that. When Dan Quinn started out, I've made this point a bunch of times, I'm going to make it again. When his first year in Atlanta, they start 5-0, right? He's got some pieces there. He's got Matt Ryan. He's got Julio Jones. He's got Roddy White, right? He's got a couple of guys on defense, but really not a lot of big names. They go 5-0. Everybody's excited. Man, we hit a home run with this guy. And then they lose. They end up 6, and I think they lost 8 of their last 9 is the way it worked out. And they missed the playoffs, right? So they finished 6 and whatever it was, 6-10 back then?
I think so, yeah. It was 6-10, yeah.
Then they have a full offseason. It was the same thing. He was hired late in the process. It wasn't hired until the 2nd or 3rd day of February because
we were in the Super Bowl.
Made a deep playoff run, right?
Yep.
So same sort of obstacles that McDonald faced this year, and getting his staff put together late, not being able to be involved with his GM at the time was Thomas Dimitroff and their draft process and all of that. So the GM had to try to stock the cupboards for him. And then they get a full offseason, and the following year they win the division, go to the Super Bowl, almost win it. I'm anticipating that this offseason coming up is going to be one of the most impactful ones maybe that we've seen since 2015, when the Seahawks are trying to hang on to the end of their Super Bowl window, because of the continuity, because they're going to be involved in the process all the way through.
Yeah, no, this offseason for this team and the direction in this franchise's future is going to really be massive. And I think, I've kind of got asked on one of our shows about what kind of hot seat is John Schneider on? Is he in hot or scorching hot? I said he's under boiling hot right now. Like, it's bubbling and it's steaming. Like, it's not scorching to the point where, you touch it and your hand disintegrates, but I don't think he's just in a normal hot seat. I think ownership is going to demand a lot of improvement because, I remember Pete Carroll saying in one of his exit interviews that this ownership group listens to the social media and follows kind of these things that, are going on and what's being said. They've been screaming about this O-line for years. And I think, now the new head coach, and it's the same problem, I think John can't ignore it anymore. I think he's got to deal with it, and he's got to deal with it in a correct way and not just be like, oh, yeah, we're going to get, like I said, bargain dumpster diving for guards and stuff like that. He's actually going to have to go out and make some major acquisitions. That's what we're saying. Wyatt Teller trade or get Trey Smith or one of these guys, and then go in the draft and actually go and get, top end guys and see what that, does. Because if he doesn't make a major adjustment to how he's been doing things, I think John Schneider, if this team doesn't make the playoffs next year, and I mean it, make the playoffs and potentially win a wild card, he will be gone.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is a big time prove it year for him. And I think the powers that be that run the Seahawks have shown us over the last 3 years that they aren't just going to settle for mediocrity. I mean, they agreed to trade the franchise's best quarterback, potentially a future Hall of Famer, in still the latter half of his prime, but the prime of his career, because it wasn't good enough. They agreed to move on from a legendary head coach because it just wasn't good enough. And so as much as I know that Jody Allen and everybody and Chuck Arnold and Burt Cold, all those guys that run the Seahawks love John Schneider and the person that he is and all the work he's done, if we're sitting here a year from now talking about 8-9 or 9-8 again, right? I think John's gone. If it's the same problems, you never know, there can be injuries or whatever, but if it's the same issues holding him back, right? Inconsistent offense, lack of a running game, lack of balance on offense, an offensive line that doesn't give the quarterback the ability to operate the offense the way it should be run or to its fullest potential. And it's the same problem over and over and over again. Yeah, I think there'll be a change, and what we don't know is, because they don't have to make these things public because there's no union, we don't really know when his contract runs out, do we? I remember when he and Pete signed their last two extensions, John's was for a year beyond Pete Carroll's.
Right.
Through the 2026 draft?
2027 draft is when his contract, at the end of the 2027 draft, his contract is set to expire.
Well, I don't think a year left on his deal with guaranteed money would stop this.
Look what they did with Pete this year.
They
advisory role.
They paid Pete to stay home this year, $10 million or whatever it was, and another $8 million for the new coach. So they're not afraid of investing, to make the right move. Let me do a couple of things, then we're going to come back. Almost 600 comments and questions waiting for you. We'll get back into that in just a moment. This episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. I hope all your holiday seasons are bringing you all the joy and peace you deserve. One of my favorite parts of the holidays is, of course, football. It gives me the break that I need from the rigors of the job, which is the most stressful for me this time of year. But right now I'm struggling a little bit with the fact that the one I love the most, my family's near me, but my partner in life, my girlfriend's not nearby. If you're struggling with anything in your life, be it just the grind of the daily rat race or something much deeper, sometimes turning to someone else for help is the answer. And if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire. You get matched with a licensed therapist. If you don't like that therapist, you don't think it's a match, you can switch at any time for no additional charge. Find comfort this December with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/forever today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/forever. Also sponsoring the program tonight, my friends over at Doer, the best apparel company you've probably never heard of. DUER, built for doing. You can see here, lifestyle apparel for any occasion. Those are my favorites right there. The performance denim jeans, 20% stretch in these things. They're incredibly comfortable. They're made with breathable material, antibacterial, sustainable materials. But you also know the moment you take them out of the package, they are built to last. They are built for doing. And right now, they are giving viewers and listeners of this program a special deal as well at this unique URL. If you go to shopdoer.com/forever, you'll get 20% off your first order. That's shopdoer, DUER.com/forever. All right, let's get to some of these comments, shall we?
Let's do it.
So many of them. I never know whether to go back to the beginning and get the oldest ones or start at the end, because they've reacted to what we've said so far, almost an hour into it. Let's go back to the beginning, because some of you jumped in the comments before we even went live. Let's see. I can't even wheel it back that far. All right, let's see what we got. Some of this should be good. And we are still going to also want to tease something, though, before we get into that. Very special announcement coming up at the end of the show that Bryce and I have. Also, if you want to support the program, hit subscribe, hit that bell button for notification of future episodes. All the other ways you can support the show are down below in the description. One thing I haven't added to the description yet, but I will. But if you follow me on Twitter or Blue Sky at Seahawks Forever, you can find it there as well. Is I started a modest GoFundMe based on your advice. I ran a poll and it was overwhelmingly in favor of doing this, so that I can go cover the Senior Bowl. I've been approved for media credentials to go down and spend the entire week in Mobile, the end of January, cover all the practices, press conference, talk to coaches and players and draft prospects, and of course, watch the game, videotape a lot of stuff, do shows from down there every day and bring a bunch of content back and do things when I return as well. It's just, it's a little bit of a heavy lift as far as travel expenses and taking a week off from work. So if you want to support that, you can check out that GoFundMe as well. All right, let's get into some of this. What do we got? Ron Chandler, who I don't recall, so new to the stream. Welcome, Ron. I think Macdonald may need a few years before he's truly ready. He can definitely run a defense, but still learning to be a head coach. Bryce, you're someone who coaches. You've been an offensive coordinator, a coach, you coach quarterbacks, you run an academy, you played quarterback in college. Talk about that part of the learning curve, because I thought it was really striking early in the season where almost every time he stepped behind the podium, you kind of felt it. You felt like he was learning how to handle all the other stuff, whereas his entire career up until that point, all he had to worry about was calling the defense, right? There's so much more to it.
Yeah, there is. And there's a lot to go into, you're used to as a coach before ever being a head coach. You're dealing with just, hey, the game plan, what we're attacking on this. And you're looking, like you said, you have tunnel vision almost on what you're focused on. Your thing as a head coach is you're involved in, and in Mike's case, he was still very heavily involved in the defense, but you look at some of, the other coaches like a Belichick or, even like a Bill Walsh back in the day. They have to be extremely good at managing their coaches and following up and finding out how their coaches are going about things, like know and have a pulse for everything that's going on within the building, more so than just maybe their area of expertise. And I think that's something that Mike had to adjust to this year. And I think that's where Leslie Frazier played a big role in that, was maybe keeping him focused on that and not being like, hey, don't get so consumed by game planning for defense. You still have to make sure. And maybe that's where part of the issue with the offense came in, is he was too hands off and not, paying attention enough to what was going on. And he made comments about that in training camp about how, hey, I'm just going to let Ryan Grubb go do the offense.
Yeah.
And I think that's maybe one of his faults, and maybe something when he does his own self-evaluation of this offseason is an area of like, hey, I shouldn't have done that. I should have been more involved in what, making sure he understood the vision and what I wanted to see out of our offense to complement our defense. So I do think he's growing into it. And I think people are going to say, oh, well, the Dan Quinn. I expected Dan Quinn to have more success out of the gate. He's been a head coach before. He knows how it all flows, how it all works. But I think in the long run, we might have got the better coach for the long run with a guy that as he grows and matures, he's not going to be in a situation where, he's pushing late 50s, early 60s as a coach, when we're back up in that, we're going with a guy with like, hey, when he's finally fully dialed in, he's maybe going into his 40s at that point when he finally gets dialed in, and we got this young, innovative guy still that, we can still have for another 10 years on top of that. So I think he learned, and I think he's going to continue to learn for sure.
Yeah, I have no doubts about Mike Macdonald's commitment, how disciplined he is and how passionate he is. Just a bulldog, I think, in how he attacks the game and preparation. And I think the best example that we've seen of that is what he did to that inside linebacker group. Like as soon as it became evident to him that it just wasn't good enough, he didn't mess around. He didn't try to protect people's feelings, or stick with the status quo just because he didn't want to rock the boat. He said, Jerome Baker, you're out of here. Terrell Dodson, you're out of here. I'm starting a rookie and we're trading for a guy. And, it was a risk at the time, that was a risky move, but he had conviction about it, and it almost instantly transformed that defense. I suspect that's exactly how he's going to attack the offseason as well. And if there's anything he feels passionately about that needs to change, for example, if he just doesn't feel like Ryan Grubb's the guy, I don't think he's going to hesitate to make those kinds of moves. And I also think he's going to go right to John Schneider's office or whatever, however the process works, when they sit together and they start looking at boards and everything else. He's going to say, I need this. I need an ass kicker at left guard. Right. I think that's what he's going to do. And I think whereas I think Pete Carroll sometimes in his approach to roster building would be kind of, throwing arrows or throwing darts at a board and just like squirrel, like he'd get distracted by a little shiny new toy or something, Jamal Adams, and he'd just be like, oh, I like the fire that guy plays with. I need that, as opposed to, kind of organically looking at the roster. What do I have in place? What can I work with? What's good? And then what do I need to add to it as a whole? And what makes the most sense, and balancing the salary cap and all of that. I think that's much more of how Macdonald and Schneider are going to attack this thing.
For sure.
I hope so anyway. And also, like, not how many young rookie head coaches kill it in their first year? Not many.
No, not many. And especially, like, there are still holes, like we've kind of alluded to, that maybe we didn't know were there, but are there. McVay's the only one, and everyone will always compare to McVay. McVay walked into a very, very good situation with the Rams. Like, you had Aaron Donald, you had Eric Weddle in the secondary, Jalen Ramsey. They had just spent a first-round pick on a young quarterback in Jared Goff. You had, you got Andrew Whitworth in that offseason where McVay showed up. So you got your star left tackle, and then you got Todd Gurley. Like, he walked into a very, very good situation, and McVay's a very smart and innovative head coach. Like, he's what I think in some respects John Gruden wishes he could have been in some areas. And, he's a John Gruden kind of disciple off that tree, but
he's kind of one of one, and it's very similar.
He is.
It's similar to the quarterback conversation where, fans will come at you and say, Geno's not good enough. We need an elite guy. Well, they're not growing on trees. Just as someone might say, well, look what Sean McVay did. How come McDonald couldn't do that in his first year? McVay's one of one. Like, he may be one of the greatest coaches we've ever seen or will ever see. I just think he's head and shoulders above as far as brain power goes.
Yeah.
Most of the other guys that we see out there. And so, that's just not a fair comparison. I would say this, because I've heard a lot of this in the last couple of days too. Like, you get stuck in that. It's good that you made that analogy with what McVay inherited, because Jeff Fisher built a reputation on always being 7-9. Like, that was the thing that stuck with him. And I've had it, we're hearing a lot of that. It's 3 seasons in a row now. The Seahawks have won 9 games, right? It's just not good enough. They're just stuck in that cycle. And so I'm getting a lot of this. Well, they're just going to be 9-8 again next year if they don't change this or that. It's just going to be 9 wins every year. Well, I would argue this. They finished last year with 9 wins, obviously. It gets Pete Carroll fired. But they were nowhere near looking like a contender on either side of the ball at the end of the season.
No.
The defense was a wreck. They were in the bottom 30 of just about every category, couldn't stop anybody. The offense was wildly inconsistent because the offensive line wasn't good enough. And because a lot of the same issues we're complaining about this year with Ryan Grubb, we complained about with Shane Waldron, not consistent enough with his balance and in utilizing the running game. We can at least say now that the defense, in my opinion, the defense is solid, set. I think when you write about the Seahawks next year and you start doing the NFL preseason previews, hey, that's a good defense. They have that as their foundation. Now, what are we going to do about the offense, right? This team wasn't there last year. There were major question marks on both sides of the ball.
No, there were. And that's where I see there being growth in this team. And I see this team as more of a playoff contender next year. And the expectation should be playoffs. Anything less than playoffs, we have a problem.
You ready to talk about quarterbacks?
Sure.
So here's the thing.
Where do you want to start?
Yeah. First of all, I just want to start with kind of the 360-degree view, right? And this is something that I wanted to speak into existence, and I'll be talking about it a lot over the next couple of months, and I'll do a full standalone episode on this sometime shortly after the season ends. It's the idea that if you believe that Geno Smith is a viable quarterback and worth holding on to, you then also believe they shouldn't do anything else. Or if you believe that Geno Smith stinks and is terrible and you should get him off this roster, that somehow there's some magic potion out there to bring an elite quarterback in and off we go. I have been saying, although some people have misconstrued my words or just haven't been listening, that I would submit you can do both. And what I've been saying, what my plan would be moving forward is you absolutely hang on to Geno Smith because he gives you your best chance to win next year. But you start, God dang it, start drafting a quarterback every single year. The way that John Schneider said he learned to do it from Ron Wolf in Green Bay, the way that he says he always wants to do it, but it just never falls their way. The time is now, right? Whether you extend Geno or you just bring him back to finish out his contract, whichever way you want to do it, start drafting a guy every year. And while this year is not a very good quarterback draft in the sense that there's no sure things, even Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward, who are both going to go in the top 5, one of them is probably going to go 1-1. I don't think either of those guys are can't miss. I think there's a level of risk with both of them. After that, there's a bunch of dudes that probably don't belong in the first round, that you can't count on, that you have to project, that you have to dream on a little bit. But there's a bunch of them that maybe could be developed that'll be available on day 2 and day 3. So my suggestion for John would be keep Geno, start taking a shot on a kid every single year until you hit on one. I think, can't you do both?
You can. So here's something that, I at the beginning of the year, I was much more, and, people love to remind me of this on our show. I was very much a move on from Geno, let him play out this year and then move on for him. As I've watched this team and this offense and this, team kind of go about the defense, start playing better, and watching what Geno's been asked to do and seeing the stats and diving into him myself and diving into the film more, like Geno's asked to do a lot more than any other quarterback. And he does it behind a horrible offensive line. Like, let's be honest, we talk about it all the time, how bad this O-line is. Dan, can you name me the last true, ready to go, insert him immediately, and he's going to be a top 7 quarterback in the NFL, top 10 quarterback in the NFL, his rookie year? And everyone will throw C.J. Stroud out there. C.J. Stroud had his, look at him this year. There's been one for me in, say, the last 20 years. There's been one for me, and that's Andrew Luck. Andrew Luck has been the closest thing to a pro-ready step on the field. Look at what he did with that Colts team that went 2-14 the year he got there. He took him to the playoffs his first year. And Andrew Luck's career got shorter because he got beat up and he had issues. Right. But every other quarterback that's usually taken, even in the top 5, has growing pains. Bryce Young, Anthony Richardson's going through growing pains. You can go list of every year.
I would say Daniels in that. I mean, he really didn't seem to need much of a learning curve. He pretty much hit
but the thing is Jaden Daniels need it next year, like CJ Stroud. That's the thing. You can go off the rookie year.
Stroud looked very ordinary this year.
Right. And that's where you look at these quarterbacks. Look at what Andrew Luck did for the first 3-4 years of his career. It was ascending instead of plateauing or descending the following year. That's why, for me, he's probably the closest thing to a can't miss. Like, everyone talked about Trevor Lawrence. Oh, he's the next best thing since Andrew Luck. Trevor Lawrence has been average, slightly above average most of his years in the league. And so that's where I look at this and I said, I'm in the same camp. I think what Seattle will do is they'll add 2 years to Geno's deal because there's no answer this year. And everyone wants to say, oh, just go get somebody. Who are you going to get? Sam Darnold, to me, is not a significant upgrade except for the age factor, and you're going to have to pay him more than you want to. And he's had 1 year behind a good O-line and a great NFL play caller where he's looked good.
Right.
And everyone wants to say, move on from Geno. And that's
the thing that people, I think, severely underestimate is move on to what? Because...
And don't just say draft a guy.
I get it.
Names. Who are you drafting that you're going to bring in? And it's going to give you at least 8 wins, 7 to 8 wins, which is what we were predicted to get this year. Who's coming in to do that?
The unknown, I guess, can be sexy. You run into it with coaching hires too. People have been screaming for Pete to be fired the last 3 years. And even though I got on board there too, the last couple of years, I thought it was time to move on. That's a scary place to be because you don't know. And if you make the wrong choice, it can set you back for years, right? Look at some of the franchise that perennially just can't get the quarterback position right. Look at the New York Jets and how many draft picks they've spent on quarterbacks and what it's got them. And now they've had to just clean house again. The Titans and there's just all these franchises that can't get it right. The Raiders. And just drafting a guy because this idea that if you have a rookie quarterback on a rookie deal, it allows you to do other things with the salary cap. Makes all the sense in the world. If that guy is a really good player and can start for you as a rookie. When the Seahawks drafted Russell Wilson, they didn't think he was going to start that year.
They signed Matt Flynn.
signed Matt Flynn and still had Tavares Jackson. Like he went out and won the job, but it was a surprise to them that he did it. And it was a huge blessing that he did. It was a gift.
Well, and you look at
the sure about it.
Well, Dan, you look at the move off, all these move offs. Look at I have friends that are Raiders fans, and I know the Raiders have issues. We got to get rid of Derek Carr, get him out of town. What have you moved to? And Derek Carr took them to the playoffs, and they were kind of in contention some years, and they were decent. Derek Carr moves on, and there's nothing. And I get people want, so everyone has the aspiration of winning the Super Bowl and getting to the Super Bowl and having the Patrick Mahomes and the Josh Allen. Okay, who was the last Josh Allen before Josh Allen?
Right.
That's the thing. The closest thing you can say is Cam Newton. Cam Newton is not Josh Allen. Was never the passer Josh Allen is or is going to be.
Right.
Patrick Mahomes is his own thing. And that's the thing that build the team before you insert. That's what they had done in 2012. If everyone has kind of forgotten, they had the defense, they had the running back, they had offensive weapons in Golden Tate and Sidney Rice and Zach Miller. And they went out and they got the quarterback. They even went and paid the guy in Matt Flynn, like we talked about, $26 million or whatever it was at the time. And then they went and found a guy in the third round, not a first round pick, a third round pick. And we're like, oh, look, this actually works. He's a surprise to us. He kind of blew our socks off and plays well.
And if
look at it, like, would Seahawk fans be okay of going like what, I don't know, say the Raiders are right now and going, 3-12 with not a guy, not like the Bears where they're a bad team, but you've got a first round overall pick at quarterback and you need some other pieces to help the kid out. No. You don't even know if the rookie you just took is going to be anything. He could be as bad as Sam Howell, but you've got Devin Witherspoon and Byron Murphy and this defense that's ready to get going, and you've set it back because you went that way with the quarterback position.
And here's my thing with this argument too. If you're going to come at me and say, get rid of Geno, I'm over it. Okay, then bring me an idea. Bring me a solution. What are you going to do? Because you're not getting Cam Ward or Shadir Sanders. They're out. You're not trading up into the top 5. You'd have to mortgage your future to do it. And those teams aren't trading out of those picks because they're desperate for quarterbacks, right? After them is a list of 7 or 8 guys, and I'm going to ask you about a few of them here in a little bit, that are total lottery tickets. They have upside, they have traits, they have tools. You can see them being a very good starter, but you're not going to want them to play as a rookie. You're not going to want them to play right away, so you're going to need a bridge guy anyway, right? And if you don't have a good bridge guy, then you're punting on the season. And I never want to see the Seahawks in that position, right? Last year was an anomaly. You had the 6 guys go in the top 12 picks. Could the Seahawks have moved up last year without really giving up, what the Niners gave up to move up and get Trey Lance a couple of years ago? Yeah, they could have. Would you want to pay that price though to move up and get Bo Nix? Is that what you would have wanted to do? I don't know, but take that year out, because you're not going to see 6 guys of that high of quality all come out at the same time again. Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May look like he could be the guy, but that team's years away. And then obviously Michael Penix, who I think looks ready to go, and Bo Nix. JJ McCarthy suffered the ACL injury, and now he might not play for a while, because for all the people that want us to swap out Geno Smith for Sam Darnold, and I think the reporting's pretty legitimate coming out of Minnesota, they want him back. Of course, he would want to stay there because Kevin O'Connell is the perfect match. And I think they're going to keep him. He's not going to hit the market.
I think they're going to do the Jordan Love thing with JJ McCarthy. He's not getting out there.
They're not going to trade him either. So give up on that dream as well. But let's look at other years that are more indicative. Here's what I want to do. Just for fun.
Yep.
Most normal seasons. 2023. Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson. There was a lot of buzz that the Seahawks might have taken Richardson if he had fallen to 5. We dodged a bullet there. Guy's never had over 50% completions in his college or pro career. Doesn't look like he's ever going to be a passer to me. CJ Stroud regressed in his second year. Bryce Young got benched. And then after that, nothing. There's nothing later in that draft, right? You go back to, I think a really good example of this is 2021, but let's look at 2022 first. No quarterback, or no, was the 2022 Kenny Pickett, the only first-round quarterback in that entire draft. And I think this is the year where this is
Desmond Ridder, Malik Willis.
in this draft still starting and playing on his original team is Brock Purdy, the last player taken. Everyone else has been traded or gotten rid of. And then it's the year before 2021 is Trey Lance, Zach Wilson, those guys. Trevor Lawrence is really the only guy that hit. And I don't think he's ever going to be an elite quarterback.
Nope.
And so this idea, and people will still come at me and go, just take a guy in the second or third round. Okay. So last year that would have been, there were two guys, right, that we talked about. There was Spencer Rattler, who's gotten a chance to start a couple times for the Saints this year. Doesn't look like a starter to me. And Michael Pratt, who didn't even make the final 53 and is on a practice. Right. That's it. It's such a crapshoot. The hit rate is so bad that if you looked at it from like a gambling standpoint and you said, here's the success rate on this thing, and you put money on that thing, you might as well just light it on fire. You can't count on it.
No, and that's the whole thing. Like, I'm not sitting here going, Geno is our franchise quarterback. Geno's the guy that we're going to have here for the next 6 years. I would be okay. And Geno hasn't played himself into a $40 or $50 million contract. He hasn't. No. I think what they do is they extend 2 years on what he's got, but with those 2 years, it's going to be opt-out team option kind of incentive build in what he's got already.
Yep.
And if they find a guy and they start taking quarterbacks and you hit on somebody in the next 2 years, then Geno's probably gone. And that's okay. But to just go and be like, hey, we're getting rid of him this year because of the interceptions. Well, like I already alluded to earlier, you asked a guy to have the highest shotgun rate, one of the lowest running back carries in the NFL behind a bad offensive line to throw the ball all over the field, and you didn't give him a quick game. You basically didn't give this dude any answers to the giant quiz, which is NFL defenses. And you talk about Sam Darnold and, we can get any vet quarterback in here and we won't see the regression. How many good seasons has Sam Darnold had? None, except for this year.
Yeah.
Which is the same thing you could have said about Geno when he went from the Jets to the Chargers to the Giants. Sam did the same thing. He went from the Jets to the Panthers to the 49ers and then landed in a good situation in Minnesota with an elite NFL play caller, above average O-line,
two elite
and weapons, and all of a sudden Sam Darnold looks like, this is why he was a first-round draft pick.
Yeah.
I'm not saying Sam Darnold's not good, but I'm not saying I think Sam Darnold is also under the whole thing of being in a good situation with the big crucial thing. Elite NFL play caller, above average NFL offensive line. Those are the two biggest differences in that. Yes, he's got Justin Jefferson. Okay, great. I still take JSN over Addison.
Yeah.
So you still have weapons here in Seattle. It's not like we're deprived of weapons.
Yeah. He's got Hawkinson too. I mean, it's loaded there, but like, here's an example. Like House says, our season was over as soon as Geno was our QB. If Geno wasn't the quarterback this year, this team wins 5 games, tops. 5. Like the only reason they won 9 is because of what Geno did when he wasn't in the red zone. Like, look, the red zone issues are real. There, whether that's a blind spot on his part or it's a Ryan Grubb thing and how he schemes in the red zone, because Geno wasn't this bad the last 2 years in the red zone. But he's the only reason this team even had a shot to win 9 games.
Yep.
Is the things he was doing down the field and manipulating the pocket and moving around in it. And even with all that pressure and dealing with all of the revolving door in front of him on the offensive line, the inability to run the football, the disinterest in running the football from Ryan Grubb, how many times he stuck Geno Smith back in empty and gun and didn't even try to telegraph what their intentions were, and Geno still making plays and giving us a chance to win. I just don't understand this mentality. Like, you don't like a quarterback, fine, but you have to acknowledge his ability and what he has done for this team. And also, I would hope that you would learn to acknowledge that the alternative can be much
worse.
Much worse. So let's talk about some solutions though. Okay.
Okay.
Because I do think there's some layers to this quarterback class this year. There's some guys that have to come out because their eligibility is finally run out. I'll be so glad. I keep hearing it's this year, maybe it's next year when when there's just no more COVID extra year of eligibility anymore, it stinks because you see a guy listed as a senior. I'm going through this week with the Cougs just hired Jimmy Rogers, the South Dakota State coach, and they have an outstanding quarterback who's a pro prospect and actually entered the portal because he's weighing, sort of like Cam Moore did last year, whether to go pro or potentially transfer with his coach to Wazoo, because he's listed as a senior, but you don't know.
Year.
It doesn't say COVID senior. It doesn't say. It's like Coug fan announced he had no eligibility left. ESPN announced he did, and then he entered the portal and it answered all those questions. And so we don't know. We still don't know, because the date to declare for the draft isn't for a few weeks. And so there's a lot of guys we're not sure are going to be in the draft or not. But from the guys we think are going to be in the draft, there's some interesting developmental guys that might sort of fall on boards in the second round, third round, fourth round, fifth round. Like there's a half dozen guys, right? Who are some names outside of those top two that we talked about that they're not going to get a shot at that you're intrigued by?
So I got actually quite a good list outside of Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders, which are guys I'd be okay with Seattle taking a flyer on between rounds 2 and 7 per se.
And don't get me wrong, before you sorry to interrupt, but again, because I'm always challenging people to come to me with solutions. If your solution is get rid of Geno and trade up to get Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders, well, I don't think that's realistic and you don't have a shot at doing that, but that's your plan. And if you were the GM, you sell out and be okay, that's a plan. I don't think it's feasible, but at least that's a plan. Okay, continue.
So
gotta get off
one guy, and okay, so two guys in this class that, or you could put 3 in here with the guys that I have. 3 guys that may come out or may be able to go back. Quinn Ewers being one.
Right.
Everyone's talked about him. John Schneider, you've talked about him, Dan. Jalen Milroe doesn't have to come out. He may go back. He's a junior. He may go back. And Kyle McCord may go back. He's trying to figure out to at least give himself that option.
Is one of those guys I thought was out of eligibility.
No, he can actually go back because of, I think it has something to do with a redshirt year he had or something around those lines. So out of that, then I've got another list here of guys that are coming out. So Will Howard is coming out. Awesome. Riley Leonard is coming out. Dylan Gabriel is coming out. Jackson Dart has declared and is coming out.
Mm-hmm.
Of this group of guys, these are guys I'd be okay with Seattle taking a swing on, because I think at least the majority of all those guys I listed off, whether they come out or not, can be an upgrade over Sam Howell, for one. So it gives you a better backup. Yeah. Out of that, if I had to go guys that I've really started to hone in on, and I'm going to dive into all of them throughout the offseason, Kyle McCord's one I really suggest people take a look at.
Just tore my Cougs up, threw for almost 500 yards and 5 touchdowns, and led the nation in passing.
Passing, went to Syracuse, left Ohio State after being 10-1, lost to Michigan. There's a good interview with Matt Sims, who's his, Phil Sims' brother, who's his quarterback trainer, who basically he went into Ryan Day's office and was like, "Hey, okay, so what's the plan for next year?" And Ryan Day basically just blew him off and was like, whatever, like you'll maybe be here and get a chance to compete after going 10-1 and losing one game to the best Michigan team they've had in years.
Right.
So he then chose to transfer and went to Syracuse. And he lit it up, and Syracuse finished ranked. And he's to me, watching his film, he has a lot of traits that are similar to Matt Stafford. And is kind of exciting, but I'm not saying he is Matt Stafford. He has similar traits.
Yeah, he doesn't have Stafford's arm.
No, he doesn't.
But
Jackson Dart is another guy at Ole Miss that I'm kind of intrigued by.
He's got the most buzz right now among the 12s, it seems like. There's a lot.
He's got a moxie to him. He's kind of got the Bo Nix vibe a little to him as well. So we talked about Bo Nix last year. He's a little bit more athletic in some aspects, but I think he's got a more lively arm and can really put the ball down the field. He's another guy, again, if Seattle took a swing at him, he's a guy that may hit because he does have some nice physical traits to him.
And he's been coached by Lane Kiffin. That's not a bad thing.
Right. So he's had some NFL terminology and been coached in that. Will Howard's another one. We'll see how he does versus Oregon. He impressed you and me the other night in his game against Tennessee.
Yeah. Yeah, I watched that on the, they had the alternate broadcast, right?
Yeah.
And Howard, to me, at Kansas State was always a guy that was like, mobile, kind of made plays that way, but he never had more than 60% completions. He was always in that 55%-ish completion rate, which kind of in that Anthony Richardson sort of area. And then he goes to Ohio State against better competition. Granted, he's surrounded. He's got Ibuka. He's got all these dudes to throw to, but it's 73% completion rate. And I watched that game, the Tennessee game, from the sky cam. So I always saw from behind him, dude was making NFL throws, layered throws, seam throws all day long. I was really impressed. I saw an NFL quarterback, and he certainly built like one.
And all these guys are guys you're not asking to come in and start. You're asking to develop them for 2 years. Riley Leonard's another one out of Notre Dame. Guy that transferred, got the captain at Notre Dame, which is something that's not to be kind of looked at lightly. He is probably the best dual threat out of the guys I've listed so far, not including Jalen Milroe in that discussion, but ran for over 700 yards and 14 touchdowns. Can throw the ball. I've mentioned to you a couple games to watch, and you can see his NFL. Now, he doesn't have an elite NFL arm, but he has an NFL arm.
Yeah.
The other one, I see a lot of people putting in the chat. Dylan Gabriel's another one that, everyone's kind of talking about because of what he's doing with Oregon.
I can't do it.
I have fears because of how short he is, and I think there's some limitations to his game.
Yeah.
Jalen Milroe would be interesting because he is probably the best athlete out of the group that I've listed.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see the passing there. I see a very similar kind of player to Anthony Richardson, but with more athletic upside, I think, than in some regard as a runner for sure.
And that's why I think he goes back. I think he knows.
I think he does. I think he goes and learns from DeBoer again for another year.
Because Jaden Daniels, when he was at Arizona State, like he beat the Cougs as a freshman, but he did not look like an NFL passer at all at Arizona State. I thought he's going to LSU. They want him, but he developed into an NFL passer. I see those traits in Milroe. I think he could get there, but he's going to go back. He's got to go back.
The other one's Quinn Ewers, who we've all talked about, heard about John talk about.
He's the most polarizing guy in the class, I think.
He is. He has
he either sucks
top talent in some aspects, but then he has games where he looks like he's an undraftable player. Like he's so polarizing in how he plays. This quarterback class is not about trying to find yourself a starter 2 years max into this. It's about trying to find the guy that, could develop into something if you let him go behind a veteran and develop and stuff. And, I see a lot of people in here talking about Dylan Gabriel because he's short. It's like Russ. The only difference is Russ was twice the athlete Dylan Gabriel is at getting away from things and making plays with his feet. I've seen him do a few things, but he's nowhere near what Russ is. He processes the game really well. But again, I'm just not sold on him as a guy that, you can bank on being that effective at the NFL level. Yes, Bryce Young has done well, but there's a reason Bryce Young kind of was the first pick, and some of the things you saw him do, his escapability at Alabama and the things he did. I just haven't seen that enough from Dylan Gabriel. I like Will Howard. Jackson Dart, he's got a bit of Baker Mayfield in him, and I liked Baker coming out of the draft. Like, I've always been a Baker Mayfield guy.
So did John Schneider.
If I had to, out of my list, say the three guys for me that I'd be the most happy if Seattle took, and obviously I'll have to do more of a deep dive, see how they do in their pro days and so on, would probably be Will Howard, Jackson Dart, or Kyle McCord.
Yeah. There are some interesting guys. And as we get into and as somebody pointed out here earlier, some of these guys, they might have second, third round grades on them now. Like if you're like us and you play around with the mock draft simulators a lot, you're getting Quinn Ewers in the third round all day long and Jalen Milroe in the second, Dart in the fourth. That's not going to happen when the bullets start to fly because these quarterbacks will get pushed up the board because of need and desperation and positional value and all of that. I mean, here we are again. It's the perfect example and a good lesson for me, and I'm admitting it to all of you, because I said last offseason with this quarterback draft we just saw in 2024 that was going to check boxes for so many teams. There were going to be fewer quarterback needy teams in the 2025 offseason. The Seahawks could get more aggressive to go get one. Once again, I was wrong, because what happens? Will Levis goes out in Tennessee and proves he's not the guy. So now they're back in the quarterback market. The Jets, Rodgers is clearly done. They're back in the quarterback market, right? The Giants right back in the quarterback market because they stuck with Daniel Jones. It didn't work out. Exactly. Teams that we thought might have like last year at this time, we thought maybe the Raiders saw something in Aiden O'Connell. And so here we are with 5 or 6 teams desperate for a quarterback, and there's only 2 sort of legit, consensus guys. It's not a great situation to be in. And that's why I want him to get out ahead of this. I don't want to be in a situation where, because the alternative is you just ride it out with Geno, you try to build up the rest of the roster to be a contender, and you just continue punting on quarterback. Then you put yourself in a position where a year, 2, 3 years down the line, however many years it is, oh shit, well now we have to have one.
Right. And you get stuck. Yes.
And you have to be desperate. You have to sell the farm, or you have to go overpay for a guy, or let's get ahead of it now while we have the opportunity. And tell me this too, and then I want to ask you about some other guys. I haven't given up on Sam Howell just because he had a bad half against the Packers. Like, the list is long of guys that get thrown into a game, haven't had many reps throughout the year, and don't look good. Like, there was something they saw in him when they traded for him. He's still only 24 years old. He'd be, if he was in this draft, he'd probably be the 3rd guy in this draft, don't you think? I mean, based on his college resume and what he looked like coming out. But even if he's not the guy, there's this Jaren Hall dude that they just kept elevating and doing favors for because they wanted to pay him and reward him. And now he's on the 53-man roster. Like, might they like him more than Sam Howell at this point?
Sam Howell, to me, like watching that game in that half, you're coming in. I know the play calling wasn't exactly favorable for him, but that interception he threw was really bad for an NFL guy that's been in the league for 3 years. And I tried on our show initially when it happened. Okay, he's come off the bench. That was the most basic version of cover 2 I've seen an NFL team play, and he threw it right to the linebacker. It wasn't like the linebacker faked anything or dropped funny. He dropped right to the spot, and Sam threw it right at him. There were things Greg Bell said, other guys, I've talked to, Curtis Allen and other guys have said the same thing, that like Sam looked bad in training camp. Like, he couldn't make certain throws in training camp. Those are not great kind of things to go off of, per se. And that's where I look at it. Like, when you say, is Sam the 3rd guy in this draft? Even his college resume does not stack up as well to a Jackson Dart or a Dylan Gabriel. It doesn't. So for me, like, when they signed Jaren Hall, I was kind of excited. I like Jaren Hall coming out of BYU. I'd like to see what he looks like, against maybe playing this weekend. Like, if they decide, they get up because the Rams don't have to play their starters, they get up on the Rams. Yeah. Maybe they do put a, Howell or Jaren Hall in. I'd rather see Jaren Hall and see what he's got. Like, he showed some things with Minnesota last year, not a lot, but a little bit.
Right.
I'd be okay seeing it. I am more interested in us getting a quarterback in this year's draft that can push Sam, and maybe you move off of Sam. And I think a guy like Jackson Dart or Will Howard or Kyle McCord, they're bigger, they're stronger. I think they're guys that could really, especially, I think out of that group, maybe Jackson Dart's the guy.
This is where it gets fun. So I knew this was going to come up today, and I want to ask you about some of these guys. Bring back Drew Lock. Drew Lock had a good game today. Drew Lock, casual 5-touchdown game. He did. He had his best game of his career. There was one game his rookie year he threw for 4 touchdowns, but he ran for a 5th today. He looked very, very good. It was a meaningless football game against a really bad defense. And yeah, he did look good. There's a lot of players out there that are capable of looking good in a small sample size. I use this example all the time. Do you remember a few years ago, I think it was Zach Wilson's rookie year, and he got hurt, and then he was benched for Mike White.
Yeah, Mike White.
The former Iowa?
I think it was Iowa.
Anyway, I remember he played well that first game, threw for 3 touchdowns. Guys were picking him up off the waiver wire in fantasy football that week. And I remember watching ESPN and the talking heads on their NFL show their studio show. And I can't remember who it was, but one of them said he might be their franchise quarterback. It was a Bart Scott or one of those guys. It was like one of those dudes that just sits at a desk, former player. He said, that guy looks like not Zach Wilson. He's not the answer. Mike White might be their franchise quarterback off one good game. What's Mike White done since then? You have to be careful about those small sample sizes. Now, that being said, if you can't, there's different ways to acquire quarterbacks, right? You can go big time free agency. It's not going to be available this year. Kirk Cousins is going to be available. You're not going to go there. Sam Darnold's not going to be available. I'm still convinced of that. Maybe Derek Carr will be available. He's not an upgrade over Geno Smith. So you're not going to find the dude in free agency. But is there another Sam Darnold out there or Geno Smith that's been overlooked or that failed, that's had some time, that switched, right? Some guys that maybe have slipped through the cracks or stuck behind other guys and aren't going to get an opportunity. Like Chaz Michaels says, this isn't going to happen either. Trade for Lawrence or Burrow, mortgage the farm. I hope he's joking or being sarcastic. Is this Chaz Michaels, by the way, from Blades of Glory? Lawrence is not an elite quarterback. Don't want to trade for him.
You're not getting Burrow out of Cincinnati.
You're not getting Burrow for anything. But anyway, I just thought I'd throw that up there. What about some guys that have what about Zach Wilson, right? He went and he spent a year now under Sean Payton, just as an example. He looked great in the preseason, looked like a different guy. He started the final preseason game for them and went off. He always had the traits. We just weren't sure about his maturity, some of the off-field stuff. But what about a guy like that might be out there that maybe we're not even thinking about?
So Dan, you sent me a list before, and I'll just read off the names you sent me on that list. So you had Justin Fields, Mac Jones, Zach Wilson, Drew Lock, Tyler Huntley, Hendon Hooker, Aiden O'Connell. People have mentioned, and I know JJ McCarthy because of Sam playing so well, and Will Levis. Out of that list, I would be okay with Hendon Hooker because I liked him coming out of the draft out of Tennessee. Obviously, the knee injury caused him to fall. Detroit's got him. He's sitting on the bench. They just signed Teddy Bridgewater for their playoff run. Hendon Hooker's a guy that I could see you could maybe trade for, and he would be an upgrade over Sam, I think. And he's a guy that, when he was playing well at Tennessee, there was Heisman hype around this guy. He was one of the best quarterbacks in college football his year up until his injury.
He probably goes in the first round if he doesn't hurt his knee.
100%. And that's where I think, I think Hendon Hooker would be out of that list, the guy that I'd be like, okay, I'd be intrigued. If he's available, I'd trade for him. It's funny because you think of these reclamation projects like, Justin Fields. If Seattle signs Justin Fields,
a lot of fans like Fields. A lot of
fans. I know, but they like him because of what he offers with his legs, not with what he does as a passer. He's not a great thrower of the football and progressively reading a field. That's why he struggled. That's why they moved off of him in some respects in Pittsburgh.
Yeah,
he's a highlight reel. He throws one deep bomb and everyone gets all excited, and then he misses the 5-yard out that he should hit. No problem.
That was a knock on coming out of Ohio State, right? Could not process. He was in a one-read throw system. And, Drew Lock, I'm really happy he had a good game today, especially with him going to New York. But Drew Lock's not the answer to come back. Will Levis, some people say if he gets in a better system. Well, Brian Callahan's an offensive mind that was helpful with Joe Burrow and Zach Taylor there. If he's punting on him, that's not a good sign for, Will Levis. Yeah.
Aiden O'Connell hasn't looked bad with the Las Vegas Raiders this year. He's looked a lot better in his starts, but I don't see him as a needle mover. He'd be a good backup. That's kind of what he is. And he'd be the guy, Dan, that, hey, if we need to win 2 games because our, starters gotten hurt, Aiden O'Connell might come in and go 1-1 in those 2 games. That's kind of what he's going to be good for. He's not a go out there and push into the playoffs and be that type of guy. Tyler Huntley, but Hendon Hooker's the one on that list for me that, as soon as you sent me that was the guy that my eyes locked to. I'd done so much film on him when he was at Tennessee, and I was so hopeful Seattle was going to draft him because he's just got the leadership qualities and all those things. If Seattle can make a swing at that, I'd be okay. If they gave up the same same draft value that they gave up for Sam Howell for Hendon Hooker, it'd be a better trade in my opinion.
You might be able to give up Sam Howell in a trade for Hendon Hooker.
Potentially.
They would want a young, potentially a young backup quarterback, a guy who's less than $1 million cap hit. And that might make some sense for them if it gets them a draft pick out of it. Here's another name I'll throw out. Yeah, I didn't put on that list because I'm thinking of guys that are stuck, right? That just are never going to get an opportunity, a la Matt Hasselbeck when he was stuck on the depth chart, third on the depth chart in Green Bay, and Holmgren gets the job. One of the first moves he makes is to trade for him because he was familiar with him. That's not the case here, but a guy like Tyson, is it Bagent? He's stuck behind Caleb Williams.
Chicago.
He's not going to play, right? He's got the great story of the dad, the arm wrestler, and everything else. Small school kid. I remember being really impressed with him, watching him throughout Senior Bowl week a couple years ago. He was outstanding in the preseason. He was one of the stars of Hard Knocks for them. Just played really, really well. Accurate, strong arm, big guy, athletic. Carries himself kind of that John Schneider, like the quarterback's got to be able to tilt the room. Feels like one of those kind of guys that he's either just going to bide his time there until he's a free agent and he can walk, or maybe the Bears decide to maybe get something for him if he were available.
I think the Bears will probably hang on to him because they don't have any answers behind Caleb Williams if Caleb gets hurt. And I think he's interesting. The other one that's not on this list that, again, is a guy that hasn't played a lot, but had a pretty good pedigree in college, played at a big-time school, is actually in Green Bay, of all ironic places, is Sean Clifford.
Interesting. Well, but how good can Clifford be if when Love got hurt?
Yeah, they went to Malik Willis. I know.
We're
talking about
him right away.
And that's the thing. Like, I see some people putting Malik Willis's name in here. Look at what they did with Malik Willis, though, in a lot of ways. They didn't run the typical Green Bay offense, right? They went to a bit more gimmick. They used his legs more. And the fact that they still have 3 on their roster is the interesting point there to an extent. Clifford is more of your, projected pocket passer. But we're talking about guys that, haven't had an opportunity to really take a jump potentially. I think it was a sense with Green Bay was, okay, cool, we've got Clifford, but Malik Willis all of a sudden came available, and maybe they had him ranked high on their board because I think Clifford and Willis were in the same draft class. And they took Clifford because Willis was gone already. They took Clifford late. He was like a 6 or 7 round pick. But he's a guy, like we're talking about guys, and in this case, it's not to compete with Geno. This is just guys that may hit somewhere else potentially if they were ever to move on. So he's one. But out of this whole group, Hendon Hooker is the one I would want.
Okay. I think in the spirit of this idea that you just have to try and keep taking bites at the apple and keep giving yourself chances to strike gold and get one of these guys, is if they haven't seen enough from Sam Howell since they acquired him in the spring, all throughout training camp and OTAs, throughout the season, he got to play a little bit, and how he carries himself, how he studies, all of that. If they haven't seen enough from him in the last 8 months to think he could be that guy, then move on from him now. Don't keep him on the roster anymore. Those are valuable spots. Find someone else that might have upside. That's just me saying, I don't want to keep him as dead weight on the roster if you don't think he has a future. Like, we got to start churning through these guys until we find some. I don't think we're missing any other names. Let's talk about the play caller and some ideas there. I'd rather be flying an X-Wing. Thank you for the super thanks and your ongoing support for the show. He's throwing names out, and I want to start doing that as well too. Like I always demand, like, hey, if we're going to say fire a guy, let's maybe come up with some ideas, some solutions. Seeing some fans want Mike McDaniel as OC, but not sure he's a good fit. I don't think he's getting fired. First of all, they still have a shot. They kept themselves in the playoff race today by beating Cleveland. They're still in it. Mike Kafka, Jake Peets, Peyton Manning, kidding, just won his quick game. Kafka, fans will remember the Seahawks interviewed him twice for their head coaching spot last year. Yep. Then after Mike McDonald was hired, they tried to make a run at him as OC. For a moment there, it seemed like he was the favorite and they wanted to hire him. But then the Giants pulled the old
play caller.
Yeah, you can't make a lateral move. We're keeping him. He's going to call plays, and then he never called plays. That rule needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
Jake Peets, you've mentioned a number of times, passing game coordinator for the Seahawks, comes from the Sean McVay tree. He's jumped around quite a bit, but the last couple of years before that had been with Sean McVay. I think he let him call plays in a preseason game or two. a guy that's very well respected and that you think might be the answer in-house?
If they're going to go in-house, I think it is Jake Peetz. And the fact that Mike McDonald even dropped him for a guy that's, bringing new ideas and pushing that envelope. And the key word when he mentioned Peetz was he said, yeah, Jake Peetz is coming. He's brought some great ideas and fresh ideas and is really chasing those edges, is what Mike's like to said, is chasing the edge and chasing edges. When you make that comment with Jake Peetz, that's an interesting kind of connection there between Mike's philosophy and what he pushes, and then to mention that guy with it. He would be, as Amy's saying, the smoothest transition, and I think there would be things he would keep from from Ryan Grubb's offense and what he does, but I think you'd see a little bit more of McVay's influence in the two tight ends and the play action game and the run game and stuff like that. It'd be interesting to see who he would potentially bring in as an offensive line coach, and if he'd bring a run game coordinator, because that's something that hasn't been on the staff this year.
Right.
There's a couple other names I have that, have been ones that I've been kind of looking. Wes Phillips out of Minnesota, another guy that's not calling plays, but, been in the league for a while, knows some systems.
Wade's system.
Mike LaFleur, who's now gone back to the Rams and is their offensive coordinator, and everyone goes, oh, he's with the Jets, and he's got the Jets stink on him. I don't want anything to do with him. Mike LaFleur is actually very well regarded in the coaching circles, and he went to a bad situation with the Jets and Saleh, and things didn't work, and he's gone back to – and I don't think Sean McVay is just going to hire that guy back, even though he's friends with his brother. I just don't see that happening. Just, because he's your brother, I'm hiring back as my offensive coordinator. Yeah. So he'd be another one, doesn't get play calling duties, but be another one. Mike Kafka's one. And the one out of head coaches I could see coming back and, maybe wants to stay in the league. Doug Peterson's one that has a connection to the Pacific Northwest. We talked about it last year too. And then the final one is maybe bring back Shoddy.
So that's an idea that Corbin Smith brought up a month or so ago, and he's been pounding that drum ever since. And it's an interesting one in that if you look back over the last 10 years of Seahawks football, their best 3 offensive seasons were the 3 when Schottenheimer was calling plays. And I get that. And when Pete hired him to replace Darrell Bevell, it was largely because he had a history of being a very run heavy play caller, like believed in running the football. But there were accusations about simplistic route trees and passing concepts. You can speak to that. And also, I just remember that 2020 season when the Seahawks got out to that quick start during the COVID year, and it was let Russ cook, and they go 8-0, and he's leading the league in passing. He's in the MVP conversation. And then what happened? The second half of that season, the offense crashed. All we heard about was how teams went too high, and he didn't have any way to beat those defenses. There's a reason that Brian Schottenheimer hasn't had a play calling job since then, isn't there?
There is. He's gone down to Dallas. He's in Dallas with Mike McCarthy. So I went back last year and actually kind of did a dive into what failed for Brian Schottenheimer, because I really like Shoddy's offense in a lot of ways. And yes, there were simplistic combinations in his routes, and a lot of it was deep shots and that stuff. And if you go back and look at even his jet stuff was actually more complex in the passing game when he had Sanchez. And I was trying to figure out why. Like, the run game stuff was very similar, but why with Braylon Edwards and Santonio Holmes were you running different things? Because a lot of what Seattle did was outside the number vertical stuff. That's what they did with Brian Schottenheimer. And then it kind of dawned on me. And I was kind of watching and I was going, okay, what's the difference? And people are going to hate this, but the difference was Russ. Russ did not like throwing intermediate in the middle of the field. On time, in rhythm, get back, read it. And I think part of it was he couldn't see it. He couldn't trust what he was seeing. And you look at what that then caused. You never saw DK really go over the middle and catch. The only time you saw Russ ever really throw in the middle of the field was on a broken play. Something broke down in the middle there, and Russ found somebody. Doug Baldwin, 2013 NFC Championship game. Russ runs around, finds Baldwin deep. Russ was never an on-time thrower in the middle of the field. It's just not something that was his forte. He wasn't good. He likes throwing outside. Look at what he's doing in a lot of ways with Pittsburgh. Yes, he has Freiermuth, but it's not, George Pickens running really deep over the middle. He's gotten better at it because I think he's realized he's needed to. But at that time in his career, that wasn't what Russ wanted to do. And you had DK, who at that point wasn't running a complete route tree. He just wasn't coming out of college. And I think it'd be interesting to see Brian come back. And because the one thing he could do was create a run game. Him and Solari created a good running game with Chris Carson. And the backs that we had, you even had DJ Dallas a couple times have some games. I would be really interested to see what it would look like, with Shoddy back here, with Gino, or, a new rookie, a guy that can throw it in the middle of the field and in those windows, which Gino does. Gino can rip that ball. We've seen it to JSN and to DK and to, different guys in the middle, and have him build a run game. And this is where that NFL experience comes into play. Shoddy gets another chance at it. He might have more answers for beating Too High Shells than he did the first time, because at that point, Too High Shell coming into the league was still just forming to how complex it is now. Very much like teams struggled with Pete's cover 3 scheme that he brought in with the Legion of Boone, the way they played it. Teams struggled with it. Too High comes in. Everyone struggled with it for a period of time, and then they figured out the ways to kind of work around and beat it. I think Shoddy would be an interesting candidate. Now, I don't know if, he wants to come back here. I don't know if he's got bad blood, even though Pete's gone. Maybe it was with John too. Who knows? I don't imagine, because I think John's pretty close to the Schottenheimer family.
I would think he'd want a shot to call plays again, though.
You'd think. And it's not like you're coming to guys you don't know. He knows DK. Yeah. He knows Gino. He was with Gino his rookie year. So Brian Schottenheimer is a very interesting, I'd say, dark horse potential candidate. Yeah. I think the front runner, in my opinion, is between either Mike Kafka and Jake Peets, but I think the dark horse to that conversation could be Brian Schottenheimer.
Yeah, because you'd have to think if they still had an affinity for Kafka, and certainly it looks like they did because they tried so hard to get him in 2 different roles last year, that this offseason he would be available, that there's going to be some big changes in New York, and, trying to hold him back again and promise him play calling. That's not going to happen, because if Brian Daboll isn't fired, now, if Daboll's fired, maybe he's another guy that kind of gets into the mix if he doesn't find another job right away. But I would think that you're going to be drafting a quarterback. You're going to be developing a quarterback. So Daboll's going to want to call plays for that guy. He's not going to hand play calling over to somebody for a new franchise rookie quarterback drafted in the top 5, right? At least it's still in the top 5. Maybe one of the funniest things we've seen all year was Drew Lock going out and trying to win himself a job on next year's roster, maybe by dropping the Giants from the 1st spot down to the 5th spot by winning today.
There's one other guy that I forgot to mention on this is Tanner
Engstrand.
Yeah. He has a Mike McDonald connection.
Yep. Lions. He has a McDonald connection.
From Michigan. They were in Michigan together and they were on the staff together there. So
because
there's a connection
there. I had written him off just because Ben Johnson.
I think if Ben Johnson leaves, he might be the guy.
Right.
But
you might just want to stay there.
There's one other guy on that staff that I could see Dan Campbell maybe turning to instead of Tanner.
Mark Brunell.
And that's Mark Brunell. Because of Mark Brunell's history. He's been there for a few years now. I could see it being Mark Brunell that gets tagged as offensive coordinator. Just like Dan Campbell tagged Aaron Glenn, I could see him doing, Mark Brunell.
Shane Steichen, I've heard that name a couple of times over the last couple of weeks. Don't know if the Colts will make that move. They might want to.
That'd be a risky move right away.
Some continuity there to try to develop Anthony Richardson for one more year. That would be an interesting pairing if you were to then draft like a mobile quarterback. We've seen what he did with Jalen Hurts in Philadelphia and what he's trying to do with Anthony Richardson. And then there's always the guys that we're not thinking about, right? There's always guys out there that we just don't know or haven't heard of. Guys get hot from one year to the next. Best example of this, last year, Bobby Slowick was interviewing for head coaching jobs all over the place, got 2 interviews with the Seahawks. This year, he's not going to get any head coaching interviews. The shine is kind of worn off him. Drew Petzig, another guy in Arizona, tons of buzz at the beginning of the season about how creative he was and how innovative he was, and potentially a hot head coaching candidate. There's no shine left on him after the way the Cardinals have finished. It's interesting. I do suspect that if the Seahawks move off of Ryan Grubb, they know exactly which direction they're going.
Yes. And I think that, that's where I think that comment with Jake Peets is so telling on maybe someone Mike McDonald has found that he might have connected with and might be better suited with. And I think Jake Peetz, from where he comes from, if you look at his coaching history, I think he'd be a really interesting candidate potentially to take over. There's one other guy that's a real wild horse, and I would be really interested in. I don't think he's going to go anywhere. I think he's going to stay where he is Josh McCown, who's the quarterback coach right now in Minnesota.
Right.
But everything that I've read, heard, just talking to different people, he is extremely well liked, and people think he's going to be an OC sooner than later in the NFL.
Kevin O'Connell himself in the chat.
Oh, wow. We're so lucky.
He said earlier, he said Rams will be one and done earlier. He says Lions will win. So thanks for joining the show, Kevin. You should probably watch some film now. The other name, did you mention Doug Peterson?
I did.
Okay. Yeah. Because, he's going to be fired. And the question with him, though, I know there was talk last offseason or before he was hired in Jacksonville, because wasn't he connected to the Seahawks?
He was before he got hired.
The year that he was hired with Shane Waldron, because he's a Northwest guy. He's from Northern Washington, I think, up close to where you were from, up there in British Columbia, Marysville, something like that. And so he's got some of those connections. But I remember the talk at the time was he might just retire, and then he got the head coaching opportunity.
Yeah.
So he might not be interested in going back to being a play caller. Oh, by the way, it's official. The Seahawks will play the Rams on Sunday.
Yes.
At 1:25 Pacific time in what is now a meaningless game. I would suspect that we're not going to see Matthew Stafford in that game.
No.
Probably not going to see Kyron Williams or
Cooper Kupp or Puka Nakara.
So the Seahawks, with an opportunity to win their 10th game, and I suspect that they'll play all out, play the starters, not do anything differently, try to get that win, try to go into the offseason on a good note. That seems like the right move, honestly. I don't, like I said at the top of the show, gaining a 1 or 2 spots in the draft.
Go win the game. Go set yourself up for next offseason with another win. Go out on a high note. Don't go out with being 9-8. Go out being 10-7. And in the process, evaluate some guys. Like if you get up in this game on the Rams because they're playing their backups, then you start bringing guys in. If you want to let Sam Howell have the second half or split it between him and Jaron Hall, go for it. But don't go into this game with the mindset of it's meaningless, because in the NFL, nothing ever is meaningless. Yeah. You have jobs on the line. Like we just went over coaches and other players and stuff like that we could see maybe back, not back, so on.
Yeah.
They're all auditioning for next year.
So speaking of the draft, Bryce and I have gotten to know each other pretty well over the last year, been on each other's podcasts. I don't know if you've noticed my hat tonight. Thanks again, Bryce.
No problem.
I'll get you back once I get my merch set up, which is in the works. We're both draft nerds, addicts. Like the first step in recovery, although I don't want to recover from it, is to admit you have a problem. I've already done 50 mock draft simulations, even though I haven't even begun to scratch the surface of really diving in and watching and working my way through the draft prospect database that I have. I just haven't. I only have notes on 3 prospects so far to this point. But I'm, there's some familiarity through the first couple of rounds, and then when I do those sims, I don't know about you, but when I don't know the class as well as I will in a couple of months, I just go by positional need and sort of try to mix and match and fit. And I might look at height and weight or whatever and just kind of read a thumbnail on a guy. This the process is one that I enjoy, I think, more than the in-season process. Like and anyone who's watched my show for the last couple of years knows that the season we're about to start is, I think, as a content creator, is more fun than even the regular season. Regular season is very regimented. It's very routine. You watch the game, you analyze the game, you react to it, and then you get ready for the next game, and then you move on and you recycle and rinse and repeat, right?
Yep.
So many things can happen. You have breaking news, you have player moves, you have free agency, and then everything leading up to it, the whole draft process, the Senior Bowl. which again, if you want to help send me to the Senior Bowl, GoFundMe link down below. I've got media credentials for it. The Combine, there's rumor season, right? The hot stove league kind of carries over. They say the NFL is a 365-day-a-year league, and it certainly is. And you see it, the interest from the other side of the camera too. Views are higher.
100%.
I think all content creators experience this because some creators take their foot off the gas a little bit in the off season, don't do as much content. That's when guys like you and me kind of step forward. So you came up with an idea, and you were going to do a project with another creator. They weren't able to commit to it, and so you brought it to me. And so let me just throw this on the screen. And we don't have a launch date. We're still in the early stages of this, but this will be happening sooner rather than later. Bryce and I are going to start our own show separate from the two podcasts that we host individually. You with Ryan, and it's called The Pick Is In, and it's going to focus completely on the draft and the draft process. And hang on one second, I got to get something off the screen here. Sorry. I'm pumped about it because I'm still going to talk about it on my show. You're still going to talk about it on yours, but the idea behind this channel will be it won't just be Seahawks specific, right?
That's correct. This is going to be you and me getting to fully dive into draft prospects, the draft as a whole, and even talk about other teams' needs and potential players they're interested in. And we will sprinkle in, like we both agreed, the Hawks into, the episodes on some guys that we're interested in for them.
Yeah.
But this will give us a platform to fully focus on the NFL draft, the prospects, and give viewers and listeners like just a full-on draft experience, an off-season experience.
Yeah, I can't wait. It's more motivation to do some all 22 stuff and do some film breakdowns and prospect thumbnails, and we'll do position rankings, the two of us, and kind of compare and contrast. We'll debate certain prospects. We'll obviously do some mock drafts and focus heavily kind of inward and then work our way outward. We'll look heavily at the NFC West, of course, but the entire league. And that's just something that I've never really done heavily outside of the world of the Seahawks. And I'm looking forward to it, brother. It's going to be fun.
It is going to be a lot of fun. I'm super excited that we were able to get this kind of lined up. And obviously with you going to Mobile, it's going to just even add more content for us to talk about. But yeah, no, I'm super excited to have someone like yourself to talk the draft with and be a fellow draft nerd and, not feel bad that, I'm eating up a lot of our showtime with our other ones on draft stuff. Like, this will be fun to just not necessarily focus completely on Seahawks. Not that I don't love to, but gives me a chance to look at the draft as a whole.
And we'll get that channel set up shortly, because then you can all, get the link and start to subscribe to it, just like anything else, starting from the ground floor up. The beauty of being in on the ground floor at the beginning, guess what? No ads, right?
Yep.
You want to have any ads until the channel grows to the point that it starts to produce a little bit of revenue, which obviously is the goal. And one of the things that I'm excited about in the full scope of the content we're going to be doing here is it'll have more appeal than just outside of the Seahawks fan base. It's going to be a lot of fun, and should open up some access to some really cool guests for us too, to get some people on from other markets and other creators and media members that love to talk about the draft as much as we do. So, look for that launching soon, and follow us both on Twitter and Blue Sky for all those breaking announcements. Anything else? I mean, we kind of did like a full recap today, and I'm sure you're going to do it again on your show. I know I certainly am. Heads up, everybody, tomorrow at noon Pacific time, Brandon Kane of the Hawks Nest will be joining me. We're going to go live tomorrow. I think we're going to go live. I think we'll do it live. Maybe we won't. Don't hold me to that. But tomorrow, Brandon will be joining me on the show. We were supposed to get together last week. I wasn't feeling well, so we rescheduled, and here we are. What you got coming up on the HawkZone Rundown?
So tomorrow I get Mookie Alexander back for our bi-weekly show, the Pulse of the Hawks. So Mookie's going to come on. We'll break down kind of where the Hawks are at. And now that we know the fate of them, we'll look a little bit to the Rams game, but we'll really dive into, Mookie's kind of what this offseason is going to look like, some of the changes he thinks we're going to see. And that will be a show that will carry on through the offseason as well on the HawkZone Rundown. So Mookie will be coming on still bi-weekly throughout that process. And then on January 3rd, we have Dana O'Gorman coming back on the show to give us a preview leading into that, regular season finale versus the Rams. So yeah, a couple of cool episodes coming up over the next couple of days here.
We'll have to get her on the new show because she always goes to the draft.
100%.
Credentialed media member. Might be something. Where is the draft this year?
The draft this year. That's a good one. Let's see. Draft.
Green Bay.
I'll find it for right now. It is in Lambeau. Yeah, the draft schedule will be held at Lambeau Field.
Green Bay. That's what I thought.
Yeah, that should be a fun one.
Yeah, that will be.
I'm super excited for the showdown when we get this going. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Well, we're gonna have some needs in the draft because Chaz Michaels, the ice skater,
says we're going 8 and 9 again.
Going 8 and 9 next year. Yeah, with this defense, I don't see it. But we'll be diving into that. One thing we didn't touch on today, we can't talk about all of it, and we're over 2 hours now. We didn't get into salary cap. I'll be doing that as soon as the season's over, as soon as that Rams game is done, early next week. But you and I talk about it all the time, and I would say this for any fans that are concerned that, if they look at the salary cap now, they see that we're in the red. They don't have any money to spend. The Seahawks, because of the way they structure contracts, have been so good over the years at doing this, and also seem to be much more flexible now than they've been in the past with what Joey Lane does and how he approaches contracts, and maybe being able to massage the salary cap even more. The Seahawks have so many levers they can pull next year, very, very easy levers. They can bring every key player on this roster back next year and have money to spend in free agency. Do not worry about that part of it. We'll get into that more in the next couple of weeks for sure. That was the wrong sound effect, though. I was on the wrong part of my board here. Let's do this. Thank you for coming on the show, Bryce. Appreciate that, always.
Thanks for having me.
There we go. That's better. And then I just always like to have a little bit of music to take us out. Check out the HawkZone Rundown. Subscribe to their channel. Where are you at with subscribers now? You're close to 1,000, right?
We're close. We're at just under 950, guys. If you can help us get over that and get to 1,000, it'd be huge. So please come over, subscribe. Be there tomorrow. Our show's live, 7:30 with Mookie Alexander.
Just so you all know, 1,000 subscribers is the magic mark where you get to start monetizing your channel after that. So if you want to support those guys and you like what Bryce and Ryan do, get over there, give them a sub. It'll help them grow the channel. Anything else? Anything you want to add? Anything we left out?
I don't think so. I think we're good. I think we covered a lot tonight, Dan. And
we did 2 hours, 12 minutes.
2 hours and a bit. Yeah.
Topped out at about 800 viewers, live viewers, and about 1,000 comments and questions. Thanks so much, everybody, for chipping in and engaging and being part of the community. Really appreciate it. Appreciate your time and you being here with us. Bryce, tune in tomorrow on Seahawks Forever. Follow me on Seahawks Forever on Twitter and Blue Sky. Shout out to BetUS for sponsoring this program and all my other sponsors. All the ways you can support the show are down below. Forever and always go Hawks. Until next time.